Ms. Malaz,
Here.
Mr. Callie,
Here.
Ms. Salines Gorman,
Here.
Mr. Elmers, Mr. Bourgeois,
Here.
Mr. Hidalgo,
Here.
Ms. Cormier, Mrs. Sagrera, Mr. Lane,
Here.
Representative Zarang,
Here.
Senator Henskins. You have a quorum.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Singer. Members, moving on to agenda item number 3, approval of the agenda. No changes to the agenda at this time. I've got a motion by Mr. Bourgeois, second by Ms. Gorman. Any public comments on the agenda? Any objection to the motion? Motion is approved. Approval of the minutes from last month's meeting, which Inger circulated. Got a motion by Ms. Malaz, a second by Mr. Banks. For the approval of the minutes. Any public comment on minutes? Any objection? Motion is approved. Agenda item number 5, old business announcements. Do members have any old business to discuss before the board? Members, I will take this opportunity under this agenda item to introduce Mr. Oliver Craddock. Where is Oliver? Did he leave? Oliver is in the back. So Oliver is a member of the Governor's Fellows Program who will be assigned to the Louisiana Department of Economic Development. He's here with Mr. Whitty, and has been assigned to Secretary Pearson for the summer. And Oliver is actually the brother of Everett, who was one of our fellows about 2 or 3 years ago at CPRA. And so it seems like the Craddock family continues to make moves and impress. So Oliver, wanted to welcome you to the CPRA board meeting and congratulations on your fellowship. So, members, any other announcements, old business? All right, moving on to agenda item number 6. We're going to get an update this morning from Mr. Lazina with CPRA and Mr. Roberts with LUMCON on the National Estuary and Research Reserve.
Thank you. Morning, Chairman. Morning, members. Good to be here. It's this topic hadn't really updated the board in a while. We've sort of just glanced at it a little bit, and so wanted to give a little more update and some announcements with that. So for the past good while, we have actually been going through the designation process to put a National Estuary and Research Reserve in Louisiana. I can tell you, if you're familiar with the program, I'll touch a little bit. There had been a gaping hole along the coastal states that Louisiana, of all places, didn't have an estuary and research reserve. So some time ago, the governor started that process with a nomination letter, and just wanted to give an update on where we are here, and some words from Dr. Roberts as well. So like I mentioned, the National Estuary and Research Reserve right now is about 30 places. Protected places. This is through NOAA as the lead federal agency. It's a state partnership through National Ocean Service, so similar to Sea Grant or the Estuary Program with EPA, if you're familiar with that. Really trying to get I'll talk about it a little later, more like a franchise, I guess. They'll probably get mad that I say that, but a little bit of federal push behind some local issues, but also at the same time bringing awareness on some of these things. So it's about local relevance. It's the needs of the areas where these research reserves are located. It's about the science there. It's about the people there. It's those places, but also bringing on board that more national outlook, national monitoring, the platform to really move some of these things and get that education going. So I mentioned partnership, and the state's role in that is land ownership and management. In this particular case, you'll see that reserve staff members are employed. They're state of Louisiana employees. Program implementation, the day-to-day operations, and of course money. The funding is the 30% match with the federal government, NOAA, on that case. The federal role, like I mentioned, is national policy, program guidance, technical assistance, which is a really big part of this program, to be able to rely on all of what NOAA has in these particular areas, and then program coordination of the federal program, and 70%, as I mentioned, money that gets these things going. So here's a picture of where we are right now. This is the Atchafalaya Delta. You can see it's a really large area. Blue is a buffer area and the yellow is a core. And not to fixate this, but just get the folks to make aware, this is the currently nominated area for Louisiana's Estuarine Research Reserve. There were quite a few places across the state. There had been a lot of work done through Louisiana Sea Grant, especially the hard work of Dr. Twilley to be able to move some of these into a position where we could then have the governor nominate the Atchafalaya area for designation as this particular spot, and that's what that's where we are today. So, just a quick update on the process and timeline. There's a letter of interest that the governor provided to NOAA, a site selection and nomination. Took a lot of folks, a lot of them from your agencies that were involved, and representatives, community representatives, to be able to do that. And then the nomination of that site, the Atchafalaya Delta. So currently we're in where you see on purple on your screen, the draft environmental impact statement, the management plan, really laying out what this place is going to look like for the first 5 years. All of that working with NOAA to move this thing forward, and then finally we'll get to designation and operations on there. So timeline, 2022 is the nomination that was officially accepted by NOAA of the Atchafalaya. You see the items I just said in 23. We're pushing very, very hard to get this done, and a record of decision and designation by first quarter of 24, calendar year 24. I hope we get there. We're pushing like heck to do it. There's been a lot of people here that are responsible for that, and so we're going to fight like heck to do that with our federal counterpart. And then lastly, because I know our chairman appreciates brevity in those things, I did want to announce, as I mentioned, this is a partnership. CPRA and Sea Grant had been tasked with actually getting this thing up and going and moving. The staff at CPRA are actually involved in the environmental impact statement, the management plan, the sort of day-to-day work. But at the end of all this, there's going to be an agreement with NOAA on who manages this research reserve. And it's different. Some are universities, some are state agencies across the country. What we have now is on behalf of the governor, we'd like to say that the Louisiana University's Marine Consortium, and of course the Board of Regents, as they are a part, will represent and manage this entity as we go through now the process once it's designated on the ground and going. And so, hence the reason Dr. Roberts sitting next to me is executive director of the consortium. And so I'd like to turn it over to him briefly if you have any comments, Dr. Roberts.
Thank you, Brian. And thank you, board, for the opportunity to speak with you for a very brief amount of time today. I'm happy to talk to any of you more detail about this later on. This is very exciting for me personally as well as professionally. I first started doing a lot of my research at a near site in Massachusetts. And when I moved down here as a faculty member, I was sort of astonished that we didn't have one.
Okay, thanks.
Because I've been doing work in these wonderful sites for most of my research career. And I've been very fortunate to have the opportunity to lead the Atchafalaya Basin proposal team and work with a tremendous group of people and to learn and interact with the stakeholders throughout the basin, both the individuals that live there as well as the different entities that have interest within that basin, and seeing the tremendous outpouring of support. Just one brief example is, I gave a town hall meeting in Morgan City during the pandemic, and we had to keep bringing more and more chairs in. We had 250 people that showed up, plus there's another 150 people online, because people there were so interested and engaged in having this near. So I'm really excited about the opportunity to take another role. Just briefly, the Atchafalaya Basin, to me, is just really a unique system throughout the entire country. It contains all the habitats that's found within the state. It serves as a model for how our state, as well as other deltaic systems, are formed, which makes this a truly unique addition to the NER system. There is no other system out of all those 30 states that is anything close to this in terms of the scale of a river delta. So it's another way to highlight how unique we are and what we contribute. So for those of you that don't know, LUMCON is a consortium of all the institutions of higher education in the state, including all of the members of the LSU, UL, Southern, the community and technical college systems, as well as the private institutions. So what we bring is a collaboration and coordination of the academic institutions together to work to try to make this the best that it can. And we look forward to having the opportunity to engage with the local, state, federal, and NGO partners to help develop and manage what I'm sure is going to quickly become the highlight of the entire national NAIR system. So, in brevity, I want to thank you guys for the opportunity. And like I said, I'm more than happy to talk with more of you individually in the future as we move forward.
So obviously we're excited about the partnership here on behalf of the Atchafalaya Basin Program, the upper part that CPRA oversees, and fitting those together, but especially the opportunity for universities, plural, right? Both secondary and primary. So we're really excited about that. Happy to take any questions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Lazina and Dr. Roberts. And I'll just say, this is something that really came out of Governor Edwards' second-term priorities when we started looking at the overall health and sustainability of the Atchafalaya Basin. How do you use the Atchafalaya Basin to inform other restoration efforts across our coast? He formed a task force, and and I've said this many, many times before. If there's one area of our coast that I feel that we don't have our head around from an overall health, sustainability, and utilization, it is the Atchafalaya Basin. And I think that the opportunity that this NER presents is one that we need to take full advantage of. And so to you, Dr. Roberts, obviously there's been several conversations with the Board of Regents, with LUMCON, with Commissioner Kim Hunter-Reid. And you, I think you hit the nail on the head. The value that LUMCON brings to this is it is a consortium of universities. And so there are a lot of universities, to be quite frank with you, that are very interested in this concept, in this initiative from LSU. There's a Nichols Coastal Center that is being built on the campus of Nichols State University. And so I would just strongly encourage you to allow for LUMCON to live up to its consortium mission, to bring those universities in to collaborate on all of the various issues that this NER is going to be focusing on. Because again, I think that this has been a long time coming, and this was a conversation that I believe started in the previous administration that went nowhere, and Governor Edwards felt that this was an important part of our state that needs some attention. So any questions for Brian or Dr. Roberts? You do press your button, Mr. Hidalgo.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I have a statement that's been prepared by the St. Mary XL, which is a group that worked pretty hard in getting this from Lanier to Anier, and I think that's the new term for it, Atchafalaya, near. But I'd like to read this little statement, and they apologize. They didn't find out until yesterday that this was going to be on the agenda today, and so I've got a statement which I'll pass on to you, and I've given to the chairman already. St. Mary XL congratulates the Louisiana University's Marine Consortium, LUNCOM, under the Louisiana Board of Regents for being designated as a lead state agency for the Atchafalaya National Estuary Research Reserve. Recognizing that LUNCOM is a consortium of 24 member institutions, St. Mary XL requests prominent participation in the reserve by all members of universities to extend LUNCOM's research resources beyond its current areas. In addition, St. Mary XL encourages the LSU College of the Coast and Environment and the LSU Civil and Environmental Engineering Department to take a prominent place under LSU's university membership with LUNCOM to preserve and advance a complete river delta system to the nation. This complete river system involves riverine flooding, riverine sedimentation, river dredging, river diversions, and levee construction, all of which significantly impact the core areas of the reserve, the Atchafalaya River Delta and Wax Lake Delta. As a best practice in reserve management, St. Mary XL requests that from its inception that the lead state agency locate in St. Mary Parish, Morgan City area, to maximize the education, research, community, training, and stewardship of the Atchafalaya. St. Mary XL looks forward to the stewardship of the Atchafalaya National Estuary Research Reserve by the Greater Higher Education State Agency. Once again, congratulations to LUMCOM. So these people in St. Mary XL have been, I think, working all along to help pursue this, and want to make sure that they participate going forward. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Hidalgo. I think you appreciate that statement, but I think you raise a valid question. So obviously we've got CPRA involved here. We have LUMCON, but I guess from a structural operational framework, if that it makes any sense. So obviously LUMCON is going to play a role here, but we have heard from many people within the basin that they want this NERT to have a presence in Morgan City, within St. Mary Parish. And so at what point in time will that decision be made, Brian? I mean, obviously that's going to have to be in conjunction with oh, I'm sorry. Either one, whoever has the answer.
Roberts, yeah.
They even look alike, don't they?
I wore my hair the same today. Yeah.
Mr. Lazina, how about that?
We're there with starting to put that. So I mentioned the preliminary management plan. You put a preliminary plan in place for those 5 years. Obviously, there's funding requirements for facilities and where we're going to do that. But we start laying out exactly that. What Brian would say is the sort of the shape of how this is going to look here. So we all appreciate the overwhelming support the city of Morgan City and certainly St. Mary XL is, and recognize the importance of having something in that area.
All right, very good.
Just one other thing, if I could. I know the people at St. Mary XL have been working diligently looking for space and facilities and so forth. So, coordinate that with them, please. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So, I want to acknowledge that, they've been a very important part of the entire proposal process, and they will continue to be important. And it is the desire to have the main headquarters in Morgan City. It will take a little bit of time. Instantaneously, there's not a facility there, and there isn't money. In the money that's given in the federal level, there isn't money to just build a building. So it takes a little bit of time, but there will always be a presence there. It has to be. I mean, that you need to be in the center part of the basin, and that is the goal. And I also want to say, one of the things that we've been doing all along, the proposal team that we had representation from not just multiple of the universities throughout the consortium, but also a number of our nonprofits, both at the federal and local level, as well as the community engagement. In order for this to be a success, this is something where Louisiana has to buy in, and it's not just one individual organization that's going to lead to the success. So when you develop, advisory panels and other management structures, they're going to have these different stakeholders engaged, and that's the way we're going to overall have a successful NER that is going to be the highlight of this national system.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, Brian's. I see Brian squared. There you go. I don't see any further questions, so I appreciate the update and for both of you being here today.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Members.
All right, moving on, members. We're going to get a CPRA implementation update from Mr. Haas. What's that? It's just a brand.
All right. Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As I say every time, it's a pleasure to be here, and it really is to talk with you about Louisiana's coastal program and some of the progress that's been made over the last month or so since we last spoke. So I'll jump right into it, and you'll note probably right off the bat that top line number 113 is significantly higher than it was last time I talked with you, which is good news. More projects are active right now. That number for the last several months has been hovering in the 99 to 100 sort of range. But 44 of those projects are in construction right now. 66 of those are in engineering and design. 3 of those projects are in planning. So about 33 projects are are in the hurricane protection category, are being advanced, with 39 sort of leading the pack marsh creation projects. So I want to talk about a couple of those with you here today. The first one I want to talk about is the South Pass Bird Island Enhancement Project. You see a photograph of it right there. Here's another photo of it. What you see in the background there is some wetlands adjacent to Southwest Pass. This will make a little more sense to you. I'm going to show a map and some videos here in a moment. But you see an island that's being built there in East Bay and very lower Plaquemines Parish. So this will give you a little better idea of where we're talking about. You see we're just east of South Pass. This is the Bird's Foot Delta. The 3 primary outlets south of Venice, south ahead of passes, of course, are Southwest Pass, South Pass, and Pass Alute. This project is frankly probably misnamed. It's called a Bird Island Project, but really the major benefits of this project are the clean out of 2 crevasses, reconnecting South Pass with that East Bay area that you see here. So in the top right-hand corner of the slide, you see South Pass, and you see the sort of hashed linear features there. Those are 2 crevasses that had existed and are being cleaned out. And then the sort of darker hash line on the lower crevasse is a new crevasse that's being completed. And the material from these cleanouts and construction are being pumped to that bird island to create that habitat there. This is about a $2 million project. It's being funded through a number of different funding sources, through GOMESA, some of our CPRA's GOMESA dollars, DNR through their in-lieu fee program. We're thankful to them about that. LOSCO has assisted with this as well with some non-BP oil spill dollars. And the Department of Wildlife and Fisheries that administers the state and tribal wildlife grants are contributing to this as well. And of course, this is being constructed on Department of Wildlife and Fisheries property on the Pass Alute Wildlife Management Area. So this gives you just an idea of what we're looking at. You're looking kind of to the northwest. That was Southwest Pass in the background. That is the navigation channel for the Mississippi River, of course. You see the island, which is the material that's being used beneficially from the cleanouts of those crevasses being constructed here. But what I really want to point out is the sort of the submerged aquatic vegetation that you can see in the water, mainly in the background of most of these photos, and just the shallow open water bays. And so these crevasses not only build wetlands, but they create these shallow water habitats with lots of SAVs that are just extremely important to waterfowl, to shorebirds, and to other water birds that use these areas not only to breed but as wintering grounds as well. So you see some of that material being pumped. This island, when it's done, will be about 5 acres. And again, some of that, of course, in this area, whenever we build wetlands, they vegetate very quickly. This is there's a lot of nutrients, a lot of seeds in the sediment and whatnot that are being dredged. And so when you build new land like this, it provides some unique habitat in these areas that's not vegetated. They're really important for many of the species that I just mentioned. So this project is creating about 41 jobs, not including those of us in the government that are working on this. You see the contractors that are working on this. 3 of these are headquartered in Louisiana. The one that is not has a strong presence here in the state. And so you all were updated by the Colonel, who is here with us again today on this project not too long ago, but I wanted to just mention some things that have happened recently on the West Shore Lake Pontchartrain project, in addition to the recent update that we had. So just to give you an idea, again, we're looking south of Lake Marpaw and west of Lake Pontchartrain here. The green line you see on the map is the West Shore Lake Pontchartrain levee alignment. The pink or purplish line kind of toward the bottom of the screen adjacent to the river is the portion of that levee project that coincides with the Marpaw Diversion Project, which, as we've discussed in the recent past, is now part of the overall West Shore project. It will serve as mitigation for that project. The benefit area of the Marpaw project you see in the swamp there is outlined in red. And so you've seen this before. I'll not go over it. This is an 18-mile levee. Or an 18-mile or so levee. There are floodgates and T-walls and so forth associated with this. I would bring your attention to the the fourth purple box, if you will, from the right-hand side of the screen there, adjacent to just west of the words Lake Pontchartrain there. I'm going to highlight that in a video that I'll show you in just a moment. But a lot's been completed in terms of preparation of this project, and construction has begun. Most of this has been led, of course, by the Corps of Engineers. We're very thankful for them in getting this project underway. In cooperation with, of course, the PLD and CPRA as well. But a lot of work's been completed to date. 9 access roads have been built. 3 sand and clay stockpile contracts have been issued. And sand or clay is being stockpiled at the moment at the rate of about 2,000 cubic yards per day. And 2 sand placement contracts have been awarded as well. And so you'll see here, this is I-55 that you see on the left-hand side of the screen. This is an area where pile load testing is being conducted along the alignment of the levee. That coincides with that area, the map that I showed you a little while ago, that purple box. So there's a lot of this going on. There's base layers. Some of that sand that's being stockpiled is also being placed along the alignment. You can see the alignment there within the swamp. You see one of the access roads to that location. Some of the piles that are being tested there. I'm happy to say that all remaining construction contracts for levee reaches are projected to be awarded before the end of 2023 of this year, and obviously coordination efforts are ongoing with the team at CPRA and the Marpaw project, and we anticipate breaking ground on that project sometime, hopefully late summer, before the end of the year for sure. So you see some of the construction activities going on here as well. Again, looking south, that's I-55, looking toward the I-10, I-55 interchange around LaPlace. And some more activity here with some of the heavy equipment working on this project. So some of this is kind of hard to see. Some of it, if you pay close attention, if you're driving down I-55 or I-10 between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, or between Hammond and LaPlace, you can see some of this. You've got to look kind of quickly, but you'll see some of the access roads that have been completed. You'll see some of the cleared alignment and some of the cranes and whatnot associated with the pile load testing. So lots of good activity associated with that, and happy to be well underway on this project as well. So you see some of the contractors here. I mentioned the Corps of Engineers. Obviously, they're leading the construction here. Certainly want to thank Ms. Gorman with PLD and the staff at CPRA, in addition to these other contractors that are helping to advance this important risk reduction project. So this is hopefully old news to you by now, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that on May 25th, the state legislature approved our 2023 master plan that was presented to you all and approved for submittal to the legislature on April 19th. During that board meeting. So happy to be able to report that. In addition, our annual plan was approved as well. Both, again, were approved unanimously, continuing a tradition that I hope we can keep alive, and certainly highlighting the level of support for the work that we all do and that you all oversee as the board. So thank you all for that, and happy to be able to report that as well. We were able to be joined by the governor just last month at a ribbon cutting on the Spanish Pass project. We I've talked a good bit about this, but we put together a nice video of that event and some of the project features. I'll be quiet and just let this play. There should be audio with this. Here we go.
We're on some of the newest land in Plaquemine Parish. 2 years ago, everything you see behind me was open water, and this project is going to build over 1,600 acres of new marsh and ridge habitat.
This is what progress looks like. This project not only represents a $100 million investment in our coast, but it also shows the dedication to preserving the future of coastal Louisiana.
This is important, but it also shows what we can do when we all work together and when we have the resources that we dedicate to these important projects.
This project is intended to create habitat that was damaged or lost from the BP oil spill. It's part of the NERDA program, which stands for Natural Resource Damage Assessment. A secondary benefit is the storm protection that this marsh and ridge will provide to Lower Plaquemine Parish. This project is going to place almost 11 million cubic yards of sand in an area where there was no land previously. To put that in perspective, on an average day, they pump about 40,000 cubic yards. That equals 2,500 dump trucks every day coming here and dumping a load of sand for almost 2 years.
And as you look along this newly built land and restored bridge, you'll see native trees and plants that were cultivated by the Barataria-Terrebonne National Estuary Program at their plant production facility on the campus of Nicholls State University. Each of these plants was placed by a volunteer. Another economic factor that we can't ignore is the impact it had on our workforce.
A project this size, the construction contractor has over 130 people working in the project. There's a land-based crew and a river-based crew, so that includes bulldoze drivers, airboat drivers, crew boat drivers, and the whole crew working on the dredge. And they work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Louisiana companies, including Weeks Marine, Baird Engineering, Royal Engineering, Duplantis Design Group, and many more were all integral to the success of this project. But this project highlights the dedication and determination of the coastal program to find large-scale, long-term solutions to restore the coast and literally to protect our way of life.
3, 2, 1.
Hey, there we go. Congratulations. Big deal. Thank you.
And so as this photograph pans up, it's looking basically due west, but you can see the light-colored sediment in the photograph, and you virtually can't see where it ends. That's the scale of this project. Again, I know we've talked a lot about it, but it was very good to cut a ribbon on that. When we can cut a ribbon or break ground, we know we're making progress, and want to thank certainly Plaquemines Parish for their effort in getting that project accomplished, and the event that we had just last month. In addition to the TIG, staff at CPRA, and the Department of Interior, who was the lead trustee implementation group agency involved in that project. So in addition to audio on this one, but in addition to cutting ribbon, we also were able to break ground in partnership with Jefferson Parish, NOAA, Louisiana Sea Grant, and a few others on the Bucktown Living Shoreline Project. So you see a pile of ceremonial dirt right there, but this project is much, much more than a pile of dirt. Of course, it's the incorporation of some living shoreline features in Lake Pontchartrain, with the creation of some marsh, a kayak launch, there's a boardwalk there, of course, that I mentioned earlier that will really allow for public access to the lake, public access to our coastal wetlands in an urban area, a place that's literally within walking distance of much of the east bank of Jefferson Parish. And so excited to see this project get underway and be completed soon. If you happen to be in the Bucktown area, if you're perhaps at R&O's restaurant, walk across the levee and take a look at this. It's pretty cool. We have done a lot of this lately, so bear with me, but mentioned Upper Barataria Marsh Creation Project in the past. We had an event there as well, celebrating the almost completion of that project. It's a 1,600-acre marsh creation project in the Barataria Basin. It's a sister project of the Spanish Pass project that I just mentioned. This is another oil spill NERDA project. The federal lead on this project is NOAA, in partnership with the other TIG agencies, us, Jefferson Parish, and so forth. So we're excited to be out there. Hopefully you saw some of the media coverage related to that. This, of course, will put more wetlands between the east bank of Plaquemines Parish, the west bank of Plaquemines Parish and the west bank of Jefferson Parish and the Gulf of Mexico, and will also be nourished by the upcoming Mid-Barataria Sediment Diversion Project, and is the latest in, I'm going to say, 10 or 12 projects that have been completed in the same vicinity, literally building tens of thousands of acres of our coastal wetlands along the land bridge in the Barataria Basin. So we had a little event a couple of weeks ago, the State of the Coast Conference. It was very, very it was a great conference. I will say that. Very well attended. About 1,200 participants attended this conference. It was the first one that we've been able to have since the pandemic. Those of you that participated in the previous conference know that it was held virtually, and while it was good, I will say that virtual conference leaves a little bit desired, and so it was very good to be back together again, which was the theme of the conference this go around. So we had, between CPRA and GOCA staff, about 90 folks attend this conference on various days, not all for the entire time. And about half of those presented on our projects, on our programs, policy, and so forth at that conference. So I hope you were able to make it. I know those that did all came away learning something new and having a better understanding of our coastal program. And so I want to thank CRCL, the Water Institute, and we served as a co-sponsor with them as well for that conference. So, want to have a little fun and kind of a good story. You guys know I like my birds and my birds that have been banded. And so, what you see here is a photograph of a Wilson's plover. some of the O&E staff decided to name him Wilson as such, and he did indeed take a big adventure. But this bird was spotted on May 31st, just a couple of weeks ago, on the Chandeleur Islands. As you know, we're preparing to do some work on the Chandeleur Islands in the near future. As such, we're doing some surveys out there looking for turtles. We've talked about that in the past, and other wildlife that's out there as well. And so, photograph was taken of this by one of our PMs, by Todd Baker, again on May 31st of this year. When he got back to the office, you can't really see it in this photograph, but if I point it out to you, or if I mention it, you may be able to tell there are actually 3 bands on this bird's legs, and I'll show you a little bit of a close-up that's a little more evident earlier. And so it turned out when he got back to the office and started looking at a close-up of this picture that he realized that the bird was banded. And in talking with some of his contacts in the birding world and the wildlife world, we learned that this bird was banded on Round Island in Mississippi in 2021, and I think May of 2021. We also learned that, well, you can see, hopefully you can see the bands there. There's a red band. Let me back up. You see a red and a white band on the bird's right leg and a yellow band on the bird's left leg. So if you look at a close-up here, it's difficult to see, but you can see the yellow band on the left leg and the red and white band on the right leg. It's a 7-inch tall bird. This is a small creature, delicate animal. They breed solitarily, nest solitarily on our barrier shorelines and barrier islands. But in addition to being spotted on the Chandeleur Islands of this year, and we confirmed that it was born on Round Island, Mississippi in 2021, in January of last year it was spotted in Guatemala. This same bird, and so the pin that you see in the country of Guatemala is not exactly the location it was spotted. In fact, we think it was spotted on the coast. We all like to hang out on the coast, right? So on the Pacific coast, that is. So this little bird, if it traveled as the plover flies, if you will, has made it from Mississippi to the Chandeleur Islands and 1,000 miles due south to the country of Guatemala, and then back, and is now nesting and rearing its own chicks on Louisiana's coast in St. Bernard Parish. And so we'd like to say he was born in Mississippi, vacationed in Guatemala, and chose Louisiana as his home. But you know, we talk about Louisiana's coastal problems not being a local problem, right? They're a national problem, and I always like to say they're indeed an international problem, and this is why. This is one of the reasons why, one of many reasons why. So another reason I wanted to mention this is I did want to tease at the next board meeting, we're going to ask Todd to come and provide a little more in-depth information. There are lots of these stories. I've only told you a couple of them, but we were fortunate enough to band some pelicans earlier in the week on Queen Bess Island. I was talking with some of the bird banders there, and well over 100 of those bands have been recovered in one way or another around the country and around the world. And so stay tuned. At the next board meeting, we're going to ask Casey Wright and Todd Baker to come and give you a little bit more of a comprehensive update on some of these kinds of stories. And so you see them there as a chick and then as an adult. So anyway, I just think that stuff's pretty cool, so I like to share it with you. So before we move on, I did want to say a couple of things about a couple of staff members at CPRA. The first one is a staff member that will be retiring relatively soon. It's not Chairman Klein. This is somebody else. But it's Rick Rainey. Many of you probably know Rick Rainey, and to be honest, many of you probably don't know Rick Rainey. He has been around for a long, long time. He's got 31 years of service with the state, all of which I think is with either DNR, OCPR, or CPRA. But Rick has really been an individual doing yeoman's work, oftentimes in the background, and some of the things that some of us don't always think of. But Rick, who I think is here, I hope he's here because I'm going to ask him to come up in just a moment. Rick and Yenneker Visser were the authors of the first adaptive management paper ever published about Louisiana and Louisiana's coastal program. He was around as we were beginning our monitoring program. With Greg Steyer and some of those other folks. Kirk Reinhardt, I think, is here as well, and some others way back when, 30 or so years ago. And over the last 10 or 15 years has really been the architect of not just the monitoring program at CPRA, but how we use that information. And so I'm going to go back to that term adaptive management, right? I can't tell you how many times I've been asked, hey, you guys build all these projects. How are they doing? Some of you have asked me that question in these board meetings, right? How are they performing? Are they working? Are they doing the things we want them to do? Most of the time, the answer to those questions are yes. Sometimes it's no. And even if it's no, the important thing for the coastal program is that we learn from those successes and from those mistakes. And that's really what the adaptive management program is all about, and really is what Rick Rainey has been the architect of and has been leading and helping us with for the last 31 years. Everything that Rick has done feeds into everything that we do, from the master plan, from engineering and designing projects to constructing those projects. And so I personally want to thank Rick for his service. Rick, I'm going to ask you to come up, please. I've got a certificate from the governor that I'd like to present to you. Good to see you. So I'll read this for Rick. This is an official statement from the governor. In the name and by the authority of the state of Louisiana, I, John Bell Edwards, together with the citizens of this great state, do hereby give special recognition to Rick Rainey in acknowledgement of retirement after 31 years plus of unwielding leadership and unwavering dedication serving the state of Louisiana. So, Rick, thank you very much, and good luck to you.
Thank you.
So I want to, while this is a time for Rick to be moving on, and we certainly want to celebrate him for his accomplishments there, we've also got a couple of younger staff members that we want to celebrate and some of their accomplishments who are on the sort of the other end of their careers. So two of those have recently earned their professional engineering license. They've completed 4 years of basically an apprenticeship or serving as 4 years as a professional engineer, which has allowed them to achieve the status of licensed engineers. They're also here with us. It's I want to mention them. We've got Olivia Lahaye and Joanne is with us as well. So I'll just read a little bit about what they do with us. Joanne has a BS in civil engineering from the University of Louisiana. She graduated in 2018. She's the lead designer on No Name Bayou Marsh Creation, which will be bid soon. I'm happy to report to you. I'll be talking with you about that sometime in the near future. The lead designer for South Pass Bird Island, which I just talked with you about, and is on the design team for the Grand Chenier Ridge and Marsh Creation project as well. She's also the lead designer for the first major marsh creation component of the Calcasieu-Sabine large-scale marsh and hydrologic restoration project. Olivia has a BS and a master's as well in civil engineering from also UL. She's a lead designer for multiple increments of the Northwest Little Lake Marsh Creation Project, the lead designer for the East Orleans Land Bridge Marsh Creation Project, and for both increments of the Bay Rackersea Marsh Creation and Ridge Restoration Project. She's also a design team member for the Grand Isle West End Dune Beach and Dune Nourishment Project, which has already been constructed and which the Corps is doing some more work on now. So they are here. I'll ask them to stand and just want to recognize them for their accomplishments in their young career. It's good to have It's nice to have young, bright minds in our organization keeping us all straight and pushing us. So thank them for their service. So Chairman Klein, if I may, I'll pause there with what I'll call the more traditional implementation update and answer any questions, but I'm not quite done yet. If you'll allow me a little time after questions.
I'm not so sure I want to approve that, but we have any questions for Bryn? It was a very comprehensive and thorough update, Bryn. It just really highlights all the great work taking place. Ms. Gorman.
It's not a question. It's more of, I really appreciate and really like these implementation updates. I think it's a true testament to what the agency, CPRA, every man and every woman in this room, all that is done and all that we do together. I think it's a testament to the master plan and all that we ask each and every year from the state legislature and all of the hard work that is, put forth by every single man and woman in this room, and really that it takes all of us to make this happen. But I appreciate it, and I love the videos more than anything because we all can't be everywhere that we want to, and so it's I really like the ability to hover over everything and see from a bird's eye view. Love the bird, by the way. The bird's eye view, you know, really things that we all don't get out and about with everyday life, and, you know, things that we have on our own calendars and things like that. So I just wanted to compliment you on this implementation update. Every single month you come here, and there's always something that I learn that's new, something that I take back to the office, and something that I actually, you know, I find myself pulling up on a computer to find a little bit more information on. So I just wanted to say thanks. I think it's a great effort.
Thank you for that.
Ms. Gorman, I'll second that. And I think we heard similar statements in the legislative session that we just concluded with a lot of the drone footage, the video footage. I think it really puts the overall effort in a perspective. It puts the scope and scale of the projects that we're talking about. You can get up there and talk about 1,500 acres of new land, and you try to calculate that in your head, but then you see it on a screen. 7 miles of new ridge in Spanish Pass, and we showed these videos in Natural Resources, and I would get a kick out of the members' faces just looking at this. And so we heard that in pretty much every single committee hearing that we had. And additionally, there have been entities across the state, Simone Malaz's group with Restore the Mississippi River Delta, that have sponsored field trips for legislators. And the feedback that we have gotten on those field trips for legislators to go put boots on the ground on these projects, it puts things in a perspective in a way that a polygon on a chart doesn't. And I just appreciate you recognizing the staff for that, Monica, but couldn't agree more. Any other questions for Mr. Haas? The board is clear.
So I'm being told I didn't mention Joanne's last name. It's Joanne Tribou, by the way. So thank you, Joanne, and apologies for that. So yeah, we'll move on to the next part. I'll call it the non-traditional portion of the implementation update. So as we're all aware, this is Chairman Klein's last meeting, and so I'd be remiss if I didn't take an opportunity to say a few words about Chairman Klein. The first thing I'll say is in relation to what was just said is that he was very much instrumental in us sort of taking our outreach and things like the implementation update and presentations to the legislature to another level. So I think that was something that we appreciate and has worked out quite well for us. And so, but those of you that have worked with Chairman Klein over the last 15 years or so, or are friends with him, know him, know that he has a real passion for this coast, right? The people of our coast. And as such, he often wears his heart on his sleeve. And that generally translates into some facial expressions that can be quite interesting. And we've got a little montage of those that we're going to run through quickly.
I'm sinking in the chair already.
Sometimes they're happy. Sometimes they're not happy. Sometimes they may be a little goofy. And sometimes I think they make us all go, I wonder what in the world he's thinking right now. So I'm going to be quiet. We're going to run through a few of these, and then I'll back it up with a few other things. So we're going to call this Chip City.
That was a cool presentation, by the way. Oh boy. Holy moly, that's a I don't think I've ever seen that picture.
Mr. Coach Klein.
Yes. Oh. DP, love it. Oh my gosh. The pickle lady.
That's one of my favorite.
That is an accurate description, facial expression. a shame that most of these are selfies, by the way.
Yeah, you took these.
Another selfie.
We're getting there. Bear with us.
Purple shirt. Purple shirt. That's General Holland's hat, by the way. AT. How in the world did they get all these pictures? Yeah.
That's the Spanish Pass, if you were wondering.
Coastal Day.
All right, I think that wraps it up. So, thank you for indulging me. So, if you didn't know what I was talking about the facial expressions, I hope that gave you a little better understanding of a little bit of a running joke. So, but seriously, Chip, we. That passion that I was talking about, and frankly, the way that you wear it on your sleeve, and let folks know how you're feeling, has really been what's driven this organization for the last 7 or 8 years, and it's why we all appreciate you, and why we have certainly benefited from your leadership. So I wasn't at the agency when it was born. I wasn't with the Coastal program when it was born, but I did get here when it was an infant, pretty early on. And I can tell you, you've heard Chairman Klein mention this before, and certainly I would second it, that Chip has really seen us through the maturation of this program from its infancy through the tumultuous years of adolescence and into what I would say is adulthood at this point in time. I really believe in my heart that we are in the golden age, if you will, with the Coastal program, and that is in no small part due to Chairman Klein's leadership. So, Chip, I know that I speak for all of the men and women at CPRA, and all of the folks in the larger Team Coastal, when I say that we will be forever grateful for your vision, for your leadership, and certainly for your friendship. We wish you and your family all the best in your next steps, and we have something that we'd like to present to you. So I think Harry and Greg are going to show you those. We've got a couple of things there. The one on the right, our right, is a photograph. It's a series of photographs actually of Chip and the governor that we're pinning the big mat wall in the Center for River Studies when we were celebrating its 5th anniversary, and also commemorating the accomplishments with the Maurepas diversion and the Mid-Barataria sediment diversion. And so you'll see most of the staff has signed that, left you some farewells and some notes there as well, Chip. So hopefully you'll enjoy that. The second thing that Harry is holding, and I've got to give credit where credit is due to your lovely wife and to Russell, who really helped to pull this together. But it is a flag that was flown over the state capitol on April 19th, which was the date, as you all recall, that we presented the master plan to this board for approval, and the date that it was submitted to the legislature for approval. So with that, Chip, I'll end it there. But it's been a good ride, my friend. We thank you very much for your service, and I hope you enjoy yourself. Now you have to conduct a meeting.
Well, we're gonna call an audible, and I know I didn't move this up on the agenda, but I'm leaving, and I don't care. I can just switch the agenda when I want. But I'm gonna just take the opportunity to just make some comments. I know I was scheduled to do this on agenda item number 14, but I know that many of you have to leave, especially some of our federal partners with the Corps of Engineers, and I want them to hear some of the things I want to say. But first of all, thank you, Bryn, wherever you went. That's every single facial expression in those pictures was an accurate reflection of what I was feeling, number one, and number two, yes, I'm a huge Dolly Parton fan. But I do want to just take a few minutes to express my heartfelt thanks and appreciation to every single person in this room, those of you who are on this board, and those of you that may be watching online. And not only do I want to thank you for the last 5 years as I have been in this position, but I want to thank you for the last 15 years. I remember in 2005, I was working on Capitol Hill at the time when Hurricane Katrina hit, immediately followed by Hurricane Rita. And that is what first drew me to this issue. When I was in Washington, D.C., watching what was happening back home to my home state, I found myself feeling a little bit hopeless. But at the same time, I'm like, if this is going to be a priority for the federal government and for the state of Louisiana for the next several years and going into the future, that's something I want to be a part of. And my wife and I decided to move back home, and I was able to begin working on this issue on Governor Jindal's transition team. But when I started here, my friends, my little girl was 4 days old. And now she is 15. She will be going into her sophomore year at St. Joseph's Academy. And I've spent a lot of time in recent weeks, in the last few months, not thinking about what we accomplished, but why we accomplished it and how we accomplished it. And all of the groundbreakings and all of the ribbon cuttings and all of the milestones that we've reached are a result of the partnerships that exist in this room. They are a result of each and every person in this room and all of us collectively. And so accomplishments are one thing, but the relationships that I have gained, the lifelong friends that I have gained, are what is most important to me. And so I want to thank, of course, the staff, both at the CPRA and within the governor's coastal office. I say this all the time, but it is my belief. I know we have other state agencies on this board, but I believe that CPRA staff represents the best of state government. And the same applies to the governor's coastal office as well. And I will forever be proud to have been associated with you. And I could not have done this job without you. And that's not just the leadership team, that is every single person that works within the agency and the governor's coastal office. I want to thank our federal partners, because those of you who have been on this board for a while know that when Colonel Jones or Colonel Murphy or Colonel Clancy or Colonel Hansen would come, and this really started to change under Colonel Clancy, the back and forth from the person in this position and the Corps of Engineers was often not what we'll call productive. It was difficult discussions. And one of the things that Governor Edwards said, he said, if you think somebody that is sitting in the basement of the Corps of Engineers that is going to push a permit through for us is going to act with a sense of urgency, while we are lobbing grenades at them constantly, you're wrong. And he said, I want this administration to change our approach with the Corps. And we've done that. And there have been Colonel Murphy, Colonel Clancy, and especially you, Colonel Jones, and without question, you, Mr. Wingate, have really been a true blessing to the state. And we could not, a lot of the work that Brent outlined on that implementation update is work that you're doing, that the Corps is doing in partnership with the state. And so I want to just thank you and the Corps of Engineers and all of our federal partners at various federal agencies for their work, their diligence, and their commitment. I want to thank every person on this board. Sometimes I don't think this board, the members of this board, get enough credit. But if you look at the membership of this board, there's regional representation. You represent a particular basin across our coast. And the manner and the way and the professionalism that you have represented your particular area of the state has served this state well. And there are also relevant state agencies, from Wildlife and Fisheries to GOSEP to Ag and Forestry to the Division of Administration. Barbara, who's my left-hand girl here, she always sits on the left in these meetings, serving in this administration with people like Casey Tingle, leading GOSEP, and other cabinet secretaries, has been a true blessing. And I want to just thank you for the way that you have served on this board. It's been a blessing not only to serve on this board, but to serve with you on it. I want to say a few things about Bryn. So Bryn, as soon as I was appointed to this position, it was probably within a few minutes that I told the governor, yes, I will accept, but. And the but was, I want to be able to appoint Bryn as executive director. And a lot of people look at the two of us and say, I don't know how you guys do it, because y'all could not be any more different. He is patient. He doesn't have a temper. He's mild-mannered. He's oftentimes soft-spoken, and I am not. But that's how we work so well together, is because we complement one another. We balance each other out. We are a great good cop, bad cop combo. I'm oftentimes the bad cop. I'm not sure how that happens, but Brent is he is the perfect example of what a perfect public servant should be. And he is my guy. And he needs to be your guy as well. And so I would ask that you give him your complete support, the support that you've given me, because I know he will make all of you proud. And Brent will be stepping up into the chair role effective July 3rd. But there's many people, that just provide, sometimes we just need levity. We just need people who lift us up no matter what we're faced with, people that we know who have our back no matter what we're going through. And thankfully for me, I have a group of people known as the Dirty Halibuts. I won't tell you how that name came to be, but Joni Tuck, Simone Malaz, and Chet Chassaw are all members of the Dirty Halibuts. And I'll just say, if there's ever a public records request for Dirty Halibut text messages, we're all going down in flames. But I want to thank them for just the support, the friendship, and the moments of levity along the way. But I also want to thank the people and the individuals that gave me a chance, that gave me a shot. It's no secret that Governor Edwards is not the only governor that I have worked for. I started under Governor Jindal, under the leadership of Garrett Graves, but it wasn't Bobby Jindal or Garrett Graves that said, yes, you should hire this guy. That person was actually Cynthia Dewey, who's here today. And I'm going to tell this story, and I don't even know if I've ever told Cynthia this because I've always been so embarrassed, but Cynthia was the deputy director in GOCA in the governor's coastal office when Garrett brought her back on, and I was still working on Jindal's transition team. And Cynthia called and she was like, hey, you know, Garrett and I'd like the opportunity to visit with you about coming on as a policy advisor. And so I met Cynthia at a coffee shop. And shortly before Cynthia walked in, I spilled my coffee in my lap. So for the first few minutes of my interview, I had a very hot crotch. Don't read into that statement too much. But I want to thank Cynthia for just giving me a chance. Because, I had just moved back from D.C. She didn't know me. And we hit it off fast. And just really grateful for you, Cynthia, because if it weren't for you, I would not be sitting here today. So I want to thank you. But Bryn mentioned the golden age. Is this the best we can do? Are we at the pinnacle of our success? And the answer to that question has to be, it must be, hell no. That the best days are always ahead. That the pinnacle is always in front of us. That there's always more to do. And so that should be a motivating call for all of us. That our best days are still ahead, that we can do more. We can always do more. And I want you to know that while I will not be in this position directly, I will still be a member of Team Coastal and a proud member of the Coastal family. I will be your loudest cheerleader, and I will be your biggest supporter. And I want you to know that whatever you do in life, that my prayers are with you, your family, and the great state of Louisiana. So thank you all very much for your great work, for your partnership, and most importantly, your friendship. I truly am very thankful and very blessed. So thank you very much. All right. Oh, okay. All right. Speaking of federal partners, Colonel Jones, you flying solo today, Colonel? Okay.
Well, good morning, Chairman Klein and board members. I am not really sure how to follow that. But I just wanted to say, first off, thanks again for the opportunity to come back and provide you an update, and also very equally impressed that we were able to provide Chairman Klein your last update on the 248th birthday of your United States Army.
There you go.
I could not think of a better way. It's amazing to think, since 14 June 1775, you have seen soldiers and patriots under the Army flag defending our nation. And I cannot think of a better way to celebrate it than to provide you an update on what your Army Corps of Engineers is doing alongside CPRA in South Louisiana. So, try this next slide. So the first thing I'd like to talk about, per the request, to provide you an update on the Corps of Engineers support to the Morganza of the Gulf Hurricane and Storm Damage Risk Reduction Project. I say the Corps of Engineers support because, as you all know, with members of the board are intimately involved, you have significant skin in the game. The non-federal sponsor has identified the urgency to reduce risk from storms in this area and has invested already up to $1 billion producing over 80 miles of the levee system along the federal alignment. This is huge. Why is this important? What is the why? At the end of the day, this is help providing protection for life, property, and prosperity for 2,000 residents and over 52,000 structures in the area. You've already seen benefits accrued through the local and state efforts at these locations. When you just look at the stark and dramatic difference between the effects between Hurricane Rita and Hurricane Barry. Hurricane Rita, you saw 11,000 residents flooded. Move forward to Hurricane Barry after construction of these risk reduction systems, and you had 11 residents flooded. But it's important to note that there are still areas that are vulnerable to stronger storms. Therefore, it is imperative that we continue to work together to achieve the 1% level of risk reduction as authorized and get the Morganza of the Gulf system to its final design elevations in between 7.5 feet to 21.5 feet. And I'm excited to provide you an update on how your Corps of Engineers team is working alongside the local and state partners to move that out. As you can see from this slide here, with over $440 million appropriated across both New Start construction, community-funded projects, and the bipartisan infrastructure law, we are in multiple stages of both construction, design, and environmental compliance requirements. You can already see that the Humboldt Canal preload is moving along well. We're going to have that done by the end of this year. At the same time, we've got 12 features under design. You can see those listed throughout. Excited to say those that are funded for design and construction, we're going to see the majority of those designs completed between 2024 and 2026, and executing those awards shortly thereafter to be able to move out and get those structures in place. At the same time, for those features that are funded for design, we're going to be having those in place and continuing to provide those capabilities through multiple funding requests so that we can continue to produce and construct those structures as well. I'm going to be able to talk to you about some priorities that we have with both Reach A and Lockport to Rose on the next slide, but at the end of the day, after we look at 36 months of pre-award activities, as you can see here, we're going to be able to start moving out and conduct significant improvements to the system that the state and local efforts have already contributed to significantly. So, Chairman Klein, talking to your sense of urgency, and as you once talked to me about a fire in what in the airborne parlance we call the fourth point of contact, how we can get out.
I'm leaving. It's called fire in the ass. This is what.
Very good.
I'll tell the story of how that came to be after you finish. But
very good, sir. When we look at Reach A, given the critical gap and location there, how can we work within our authorities and responsibilities to help effectively close that? I can tell you that your New Orleans district team is at the bleeding edge of policy to effectively go through, conduct plans and specs by April of 24 and get to an initial contract award in July of 24. How are we doing that? Normally, we would have a 30 to 36 month supplemental environmental impact statement process for the entire 98-mile system, but identifying the exigency to get this area closed off given its vulnerability to potential tropical weather events, we've been very innovative in executing what's called a tiered environmental assessment that will enable us get to that early award. And even there, we're looking at innovative delivery of those constructions, looking at how we can stage construction contracts, with that first award being initial construction south of the GIWW that will enable us to do preloads and put initial protection in place as we keep areas for environmentals and utilities open, but producing a system that can be flood fought where there was none before. And then after that, you'll see subsequent contracts as we close off those gaps, continuing to improve the system, and then moving north of the GIWW to continue to improve that section. At the same time, as we're looking to do that in an expedited fashion, we're also moving out on other critical elements through very good collaboration with local and state partners at the project delivery team level. Just had a chance to talk with Dwayne Bourgeois right before we came in on how we are able to identify opportunities for him to execute work in kind along the federal alignment, while at the same time we continue to produce our designs and specs and get those contracts awarded. I see right now on Lockport to Rose with Reach 1, closest to the GIWW, it's under design, looking to be complete in 2027, but we are working as we speak to expedite the NEPA process to move that to the left. We are coordinating with the North Palouse Levee District to construct portions as work in kind for Reach 3, and we're executing that effectively. And then on the GIWW East Floodgate, we're already in the process of verifying widths through ship simulations, and then we're coordinating with both the industry and locals on designs and scheduled to start construction now in 2027. So if you see from both the west and east sides on those critical sections, we are moving out as we move across the entire process. As such, It's exciting the work that the team has done to date, and I'll pause there if there's any questions on Morganza to the Gulf.
So surprised, Mr. Bourgeois. Go ahead.
Actually, the one thing I want to say about it overall, you said the governor's mission was to improve the relationship with the Corps. Well, in their vernacular, mission accomplished, right? This has been, we're meeting with the Corps weekly, sometimes several times a week. And I would say that, when it comes to anything that's innovative, nothing is off the table. And I do appreciate that. The sense of urgency, you mentioned the 11,000 versus 11. I think the backstory on that is the 11,000 was for a storm that hit 250 miles to our west, and the 11 homes actually was, I'll take liberty, and since it's Chip's last day, a pissant little storm, right, that hit us on a critical path. So we still have a lot to do, and I think that sense of urgency is still being sensed by the Corps, and so no particular questions, just a comment that yes, the cooperation between the non-federal sponsors and the Corps has never been better. That's it.
Could not agree more. Mr. Bourgeois, Colonel, this is a great example of, if you think back where we were 2 years ago on Morganza and where we are today. 2 years ago, if I've got my dates right, I don't think Morganza to the Gulf had any federal dollars. Maybe 3 years ago, give us that extra year of cushion. And to say that you're at a point in time where we have over $400 million either through IIJA or annual work plan funding for a project that the locals in partnership with the state have been begging for years, is just great to see. And I think it's a great example of how partnerships, good relationships form strong partnerships, how that can pay off. And so I want to thank you. And this, Colonel, but look, we have been to D.C. several times on this project, and the governor has requested, things at the federal level to try to get the schedule shifted to the left, and the federal government has responded to that. We don't have to call it certain things, but the fact that we have moved without shortcutting anything, but just looking for efficiencies in the process, has been amazing to see. And what's even better is that this forward-leaning, proactive mindset of the Corps is not specific to Morganza to the Gulf. That you're doing this across the entire coast on various projects, and it's just really refreshing to see this, and I thank you. Any other questions on Morganza before we move on? I think you've got some slides on South Central, and but please proceed.
No, thank you very much, Chairman, and to Mr. Hidalgo's request from our last time here at the board meeting, provide a quick update on South Central Coastal. Excited to report that we got the project was authorized in WERDA of 2022, and we started expressing capabilities to start conducting pre-construction engineering and design in fiscal year 23. We did not receive funding at that point, but we are going to continue to request capabilities to the tune of $1 million to execute that pre-construction engineering design so that we can move forward. Once we have that funding in place, we can quickly move back to our non-federal sponsor, which is CPRA, to execute the design agreement, and then we can start moving out. And what does that mean at the end of the day for South Central Coastal Louisiana is an opportunity to conduct voluntary flood proofing or elevation for nearly over 2,240 structures to the 25-year storm surge floodplain, which is an exciting element, and go back to my previous time here at the board, helping us to continue to build that fortress Louisiana in areas where potentially structural solutions are not as feasible, but to provide those communities with the opportunity to get that level of risk reduction that they need through either elevation or dry or wet flood proofing. So we are excited to continue to express that capability and then to move out aggressively once we have funds in hand. And I'll pause there if there's any questions.
You got a thumbs up.
A comment, but thumbs up. And other thing is, Sir, thank you for your service. You know, today is a special day. The flag is flying, and I wanted to mention that originally in my first statement. Just thank you to all you servicemen for what you've done for us and for the country. But thumbs up on this. Good report. And, you know, just to add one other thing, Chip, and I think it's trust is something that I've seen. I think we all trust each other, and that's something that is very special. I think we've seen the trust that the governor's had in Chip and allowed Chip to do all these things that you've done, and we see this trust between now CPRA and the Corps, and it's pretty special. And thank you, sir. Good report.
Thank you. And then Chairman Klein, Board, just to provide you some other quick updates before I turn over to the non-official portion for the Corps of Engineers to recognize Chairman Klein, so just be prepared. But for Southwest Coastal, our other large-scale non-structural opportunity that we have in Southwest Louisiana, excited to report that we received the approved PPA agreement from the Mississippi Valley Division yesterday. We were able to do an initial signing today, and we're looking forward to doing an official signing ceremony in the Calcasieu area on the 21st of June with Chairman Klein, along with Major General Diana Holland, our Mississippi Valley Division Commanding General. And what does that mean? It means we can start executing on our $300 million that we currently have on hand, 10 of which is going towards ecosystem restoration, but at the same time talking with our Rock Island District partners who is helping us execute this through regional delivery. They already have plans in place to start looking at how we can execute the first 27 homes and get a contract awarded by January of next year. This is very aggressive schedule to be able to push out, but in order to be able to get after this large number of structures, about 4,000, we need to be aggressive. And we're excited to get both their district engineer and their deputy district engineer on ground to visit in those three parishes to understand the problem set with us as we help work with them to deliver this critical program. So once again, Chairman Klein, thank you for the opportunity to execute that, and looking forward to doing it in a more official function next week.
So, Colonel, one of our board members, Ms. Cormier, who you know quite well, may have lit a fire at a previous board meeting, but she could not be with us today. But she says, I'm watching, and please send the Colonel my thoughts and gratitude for the Southwest Coastal Project. And as I told you earlier this morning, that is a moment that has literally been decades in the making. And in Lori's absence, I'll just go to bat for her to rock it as well. So I know she'll appreciate that. But thank you. I hope everybody heard what the Colonel just said. But we executed the project partnership agreement on Southwest Coastal this morning before this board meeting started. And just think about guys like Norwin Johnson, Dave Rouge, some of those old coastal all-stars that really pushed this project from its inception. Just incredible amount of work to get us to this point. So it was a great moment earlier today, and as you said, we'll be hopefully in Southwest in the coming weeks to do a ceremonial signing as well.
Outstanding, Chairman. The other thing I'm excited to talk to the board about is, as you saw on the 1st of June, we sent out a press release that we are ready to start the larger conversation on the Lower Mississippi River Comprehensive Study, that 5-year, $25 million study that'll help us relook the comprehensive management from Cape Girardeau, Missouri, all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. We have taken, our subject matter experts from across the Corps, put them in a 90-day pressure cooker, and have developed an extensive list of challenges and opportunities that we can start engaging with our key stakeholders and leadership to get their input as we continue to scale this massive study. As such, we've already conducted congressional notifications. We're getting on their calendars to go through and talk about those challenge opportunities, to get their initial feedback. That will help us set the stage to start engaging with the state governments and non-federal sponsors such as CPRA, which we are excited to start those engagements on, and then eventually leading us to our tiered governance across the 5 years to get to that actionable report within June of 2027. What probably be of most interest to the CPRA board is, as our subject matter experts have looked at this study and what it can encompass, one of the key things, given the input from the New Orleans District U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, is how can this comprehensive plan harmonize with the Louisiana Coastal Master Plan? And that will be a key consideration from our perspective as we move forward. And we are excited to continue the engagements, get the public meetings in place, and start that larger conversation. So keep your eyes out and be ready to provide your input. And then lastly, I can't beat Bren Haas's videos on West Shore Lake Pontchartrain, so it is always great when other organizations are showing the amazing work that we are doing in probably some of the most challenging construction environments that I have seen during my career as an engineer. But it is also inspiring to see the continued progress and work that is able to be accomplished when you have good partners and teammates such as CPRA and the Pontchartrain Levee District. So I'll pause there. I think I saw someone slewing their turret.
Well, I'll say, Colonel, I do believe that Mr. Haas was trying to take credit for your work. Yeah. Miss Gorman.
No, mine really, you and I talked about this a little bit before the meeting. I see President Hotard is right there to your left, right at your left shoulder. And, in my 19 years, and I know she's been at this quite as long as I have, there has never been a colonel who texted myself. There's a text between President Hotard, the colonel, and myself. And each time that a contract has been let out, you've texted. But what is different, other than just an administrative stamp, is every time you sign off on plans and specifications, because you're putting your name to it, you're signing your name to it, you want to know what the documents are about, and you're letting us know about those as well. So I'm not really sure. We're talking about relationships and partnerships. I can promise you that these two ladies, even during an event, and Chip can tell you, and anybody can here, those relationships become very strong. And when we need you, we're going to text you. So I don't know that it's a good thing that we have that link. But so in all seriousness, I appreciate the notifications just on plans and specs. That's separate than the contracts that are being let out, but that allows us both to know, especially President Hotard, because she is bombarded with it daily, and things are really progressing. It may not be let out at this point, but the plans and specs have been signed off on you. You've seen them, you've approved them, your team is working on them, and things are being pushed through, even if the public doesn't see them as fast as we understand it is moving.
No, thank you very much, ma'am.
Okay, Mr. Bourgeois.
Yeah, so Laurie Cormier is not here, but she is here, okay? And she wanted me to concur about the relationship that she sees with the Corps, and wanted to pass that on to you. And I just, kind of a funny story, I'll just add to it. When you're talking about texting and phone calls, I was upset about something. It isn't always perfect, right? So we do work. And I meant to text the colonel and say, I will call you tomorrow. And somehow it dialed. And then I hung up. And before I could fix that on the text, the colonel was calling me back and said, nope, we're talking now. And so, that level of communications has been rare, and I do appreciate it. So,
thank you, sir. Well, seeing no other questions, I'd hope to be able to take this opportunity. See if I can get my help. There he is. So, Chairman Klein, it has been an amazing and eventful 9 months during my initial period as the 65th Commander and District Engineer for the New Orleans District U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And I just want to thank you for your partnership and support as both the Corps of Engineers and CPRA has worked together in South Louisiana. We wanted to provide you a small token of my appreciation. Two things that are there is just a note from myself. I do want you to know that I find, and as I quote in there, your relentless pursuit of comprehensive coastal protection in Louisiana, I find that inspiring. It is always important to be able to do that. And then also that it's been an honor to serve with you in this noble cause. The other item that you see there is one of my personal commander's coins that I can give to anyone. I have a limited number, so it says a lot that I'm being able to provide it to you for given everything that you've done for Louisiana and for the partnership with the Corps. So on behalf of the entire New Orleans District U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, thank you for everything.
Well, I appreciate that, Colonel. That's a good-looking coin, but you have a beautiful handwriting too. Wow, wow. But that means a lot to me, Colonel. Thank you. And I've said it before. We set out as an effort to strengthen a partnership has actually resulted in friendship, and that goes for you, Mark, and several members of your team. And so I thank you very, very much. And to echo what Monica and Dwayne says, I'll tell y'all the story because I don't want to leave y'all hanging on we'll call it the fire in the butt. So Neil, Russell, and I were meeting with Senator Kennedy's office on Go Mesa and additional revenues and just the overall sense of urgency on the overall protection and restoration of our coast. And I told Senator Kennedy's office, I said, I need you to have a fire in your ass when it comes to this issue. And Neil was like, no, it's fire in the belly, not fire in your ass. And Neil was about to crawl under the table, and I said, well, be that as it may, but if you have a fire in your ass, you are moving, okay? You are going somewhere. You're getting something done. So this thing is completely gone off the rails now, but yeah, Neil is still blushing and wants to crawl under the table. But anyway, Colonel, thank you for being here and for all of your great work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you very much, Board.
Yes, sir, Mr. Hidalgo.
By the way, just Colonel.
Oh, yep.
I had one comment. Thank you for everything you've done on the Chaffalaya River and dredging. Okay, I know Mac is very appreciative. We appreciate that, and when you get to that comprehensive management study, remember it's only 30% down the Chaffalaya. Please, sir.
We're looking at it.
Thank you, sir. Mac, was that right?
Here's the conclusion.
Okay.
Here's the conclusion.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 9. We're going to get an update from Mr. Vorhoff and Mr. Bo Jones with the Water Institute. So Mr. Vorhoff from the Governor's Office. And Bo with the twig.
Good morning, Chairman Klein, board members. Yep. Thank you. Harry Vorhoff with the Governor's Office, Bo Jones with the Water Institute. Here to talk about, give an update on where we've been, where we're going on blue carbon. And the upshot is, we have a tremendous opportunity to do some very hard work, and we have a lot of work to do, but to really to start to earn carbon credits on our coastal restoration projects, sell those credits, get revenue, and reinvest that revenue back into the coastal program. That's what we're trying to do. That's the upshot. And the Water Institute is serving as a collaboration hub on this effort and pulling together a lot of different organizations, universities, and collaborators, because it's going to require a lot of different partners to make this happen. before I go too far, what is blue carbon? It's carbon that is naturally sequestered by our coastal coastal ecosystems. And our coastal ecosystems are really good at sequestering carbon. They're way better at sequestering carbon than a terrestrial forest, for example. And so, there's this dual benefit of sequestering carbon, helping to meet the governor's goals of getting to net zero by 2050. But then there's also this opportunity to provide additional revenue into the coastal program, particularly as we're looking toward, the out years and trying to figure out where additional revenue is going to come from. I mentioned there's a lot of work to be done, and that's because there is currently only one blue carbon project that has earned credits in the country, and that's off the coast of Virginia. And it's a relatively small a small project, less than 1,000 acres that are earning credits. And so, really we have an opportunity right now to be a leader in this space, and really to fill the data gaps and use our coastal master plan as the scientific basis for earning more credits and not leaving any opportunity or credits on the table. So as I mentioned, it's in the climate action plan for us to take on this work, and to evaluate whether we need to create a new carbon market, use existing markets, but we do definitely need to fill data gaps, and answer policy questions as well. The Water Institute has already begun this effort. Actually, 2 years ago, when we were starting the climate action plan, we knew we needed an update on our inventory of greenhouse gases, and this was a big kind of question mark of how much carbon is our coastal ecosystem, or our coastal ecosystem sequestering, and we didn't really have a great idea. We used EPA's kind of off-the-shelf, top-down methodology that wasn't specific to Louisiana, and since we have 40% of the nation, the lower 48's coastal wetlands, we have this opportunity to really hone in on the science. And so Bo's going to talk about kind of that work and some of the outcomes from there. But what is funding this work? So it had been made a priority, of Chairman Klein, Director Hassan, and the CPRA leadership to implement that action in the climate action plan, and to figure out if we can get additional revenue from this into the coastal program. And so $3 million has been dedicated in this upcoming annual plan to do that work, to figure out the policy questions and answer them, and so we're not leaving any credits on the table, and then also fill the science gaps that are needed as well. And so with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Jones to kind of elaborate on what we're planning to do.
Thanks, Harry, and thanks, Chairman Klein, members of the board. I'd be remiss to start without mentioning two things. The first is, although I don't have a plaque or a challenge coin, Chairman Klein, it's been a pleasure to work with you, to learn from you for many of the 15 years that you've been serving, and we've crossed paths in many different roles. And on behalf of myself and the Water Institute, thank you for your service, and your work's not done, and I know you know that. The second thing is, I have the honor and the challenge of sitting here in the wake of losing a dear friend and a colleague in Justin Aaronworth, who is the presidency of the Water Institute of the Gulf. And I just want to again say thank you to this board, to Chip, to your team, to the community for lifting us up, for sending your condolences, offering support, and being there for us and his family. Justin also spent about 15 years committed to the Gulf and to the state, both from the federal side and through the Water Institute. And while he had an outsized impact in that time, we all here are bound together recognizing that what we are working on is much bigger than any of us will ever be able to complete, that these are existential and generational challenges. And we are required to leapfrog off the back and the shoulders of giants. So we know in Louisiana that if we don't keep moving forward, we will recede. And so that's what we're here today doing, is we're looking forward. We're going to build on the shoulders of the giants like Justin and all of those folks that have gone before us. And those of you who are moving on to other roles, we're going to continue the work. So Chip, several years ago, you asked the Water Institute, when we were designated as the Governor's Coastal Innovation and Collaboration Hub, to bring to you big projects, bring new ideas. Come from the outside and say, what are we not thinking of? Help us look around corners. This is something that, in conjunction with Harry and his team, with university partners, we have been looking at for some time. And we're honored to pull it together. I'm going to run through some of these and just have them in here for the record, Chip, because I know it's getting late and close to lunch, so I won't belabor the point. There's a lot of talk in the news and in Louisiana around carbon capture, right? And I want to be clear that what we're talking about here is nature's own ability to capture carbon. There's carbon capture, utilization, and storage. It's a whole nother conversation. Coastal Louisiana marshes, as Harry said, do a tremendous job. How good of a job? For every 1 acre of Louisiana marshes, the estimates are that it sequesters 80 times the carbon of an acre of terrestrial forest. Now, note that and recognize that the entire voluntary carbon market that exists internationally is hinged almost entirely on forest, right? So wetlands make up about 3% of habitats around the world, and they sequester over 30% of the carbon. So the question that we're asking here today is, and we'll be asking over the next several years, is not, is not just about a market. It's about, are we adequately quantifying and calculating and understanding, whether there's a market or not, the true value of coastal Louisiana and the projects that this board and this agency lead. And Harry said that the state of Louisiana has the opportunity to be a leader, but I want to be very clear that this is not starting today with the Water Institute. This is not starting today with the university partners that we have on this or with this board. The state of Louisiana, since at least 2005, has been leading in this effort. And because of the state of Louisiana, both the legislature, the CPRA board, and the agency, and the steps that have been taken, the state of Louisiana stands alone in the United States and possibly internationally with the opportunity to capitalize on voluntary carbon markets and to better quantify and understand blue carbon and its role. So I'm not going to belabor each one of these, but back around 2008, 2010, there was a big effort to try and understand, in the wake of a potential cap and trade market, were there opportunities to create a voluntary carbon market? And CPRA, along with CH2M Hill at the time, put through a methodology with one of the international standards bodies called VM24. So right now, projects in Louisiana could be verified and generate carbon credits. There's a couple problems to it. Those markets are extremely conservative because of lack of data, because of data gaps that exist. Also, the entire market is built on a project-by-project basis, right? Think about it, stocks, right? An individual stock. So why there's a difference between a marsh creation blue carbon project and a terrestrial forest is we have little things called hurricanes. We have subsidence and relative sea level rise, so there's a lot more risk. And if your entire project and your entire crediting mechanism is based on that single polygon of that project, there's a lot of risk there. What we have with the Coastal Master Plan and the 2023 Coastal Master Plan and all those predating it is we've got a mutual fund, right? There are a series of projects that are connected across hydrologic basins, across habitat types. And so what we're looking to, with the leadership of the governor's office, is to try and understand how you can maximize the market or policy opportunities that exist on the backs of the Coastal Master Plan. It's a scientific question, a series of scientific questions. It's a policy question, and we're happy to dive into it. Voluntary carbon markets in 2021 generated about $2 billion transactions, and this is with actually not even a fully finished project in the United States. There's not a single one in the United States today on blue carbon. But we're talking a little bit about a market here, but I want to be very clear that from this board's perspective, the opportunity is not just that one day there'll be a carbon coin that you'll be able to sell and generate direct revenue to the coastal program. Right? Harry laid out the climate action plan, Action 15.3 specifically, and the modeling pathway. understanding what the carbon drawdown potential and realities of coastal Louisiana are really critical for the state of Louisiana to understand what its overall emissions portfolio is. The governor has set out a net zero goal by 2050. It is critical to understand what the coastal Louisiana is doing to that. But even aside from those two questions, markets and net zero goals, we know that the co-benefits and the multi-benefits of the Coastal Master Plan are critical to communicating its relevance and communicating it to the community and to the federal government to seek investment and to prioritize this work. The federal government, the international market, is looking very heavily at what the carbon balance is, what the carbon impacts are of activities. And so fully understanding that for the coastal program is critical. And so it's not just about a market that we're looking at it. Again, Chip, I mentioned that the governor designated us as the Coastal Innovation and Collaboration Hub, and one of the charges was to bring big ideas, and one of the charges was to not do it alone. This is going to be a big tent effort. This is not just going to be the Water Institute. There are university partners that have been working on this for decades. There are private sector partners that are internationally recognized in leadership of this. There are law firms up and down the line. So this is going to be a big tent effort to try and coalesce the best in thought and research and policy for the benefit of the state of Louisiana. Harry mentioned some of the beginning work. This is one of the last two slides. Harry mentioned some of the existing work that's been going on. We've been looking for a couple years now at a high-level overview, a back in the napkin, so to say, of the coastal program. Not towards a market, but what are the carbon impacts? And it is pretty clear from this research that I'm not going to go into the detail of this. Number one, because I'm not a scientist, I'm only science adjacent. But number two, in the interest of time. But the long and short of it is that it is apparent that over time and also thanks to the investments of the Coastal Master Plan, the coastal Louisiana will be a net sink over time. So this is a little bit the final slide here on how we're going to be going through this. Number one is we're going to be looking at the policy and their accreditation frameworks. What needs to exist both in state policy and state law, and in connection with the federal and international markets to be able to generate carbon credits or to be able to explore that in Louisiana. But also, one of the big issues is that the assumption is that there's a lot of carbon being left on the table. Right now, under the existing methodologies that exist on the international market, if an acre of Louisiana marsh is inundated or becomes open water, the assumption is that 100% of the carbon goes back into the atmosphere. Right, 100% goes back into the atmosphere, not accounting for subaquatic vegetation, or submerged aquatic vegetation, not accounting for the soil carbon, not accounting for the lateral flux of carbon that goes from the marshes and out into other places. So one of the things that we're going to be looking at is the fate of carbon. What happens as our coastal habitats do what they do, which is they are dynamic and they change and they move. Rather than thinking about this in a specific polygon and a specific molecule of carbon in one place, how can we think about the net ecosystem carbon benefit of coastal Louisiana? Also looking at methane, what the flux is between methane and carbon, and trying to understand the fate of carbon from being pulled down in the atmosphere all the way into deep storage in the Gulf. So that is what we're excited to work on with the governor's office, with the staff at CPRA, many of the university and private sector partners, and look forward to briefing the board on it in the future.
All right, thank you, Mr. Jones. This agenda item and the next agenda item are two initiatives that I think are of utmost importance that the next administration, whoever the new governor is, needs to make a priority. And so, Harry, I thought your opening comments on why we're looking at this concept were spot on, and Bo, your overview was great. But there's going to be a new governor that's sworn in January. And a lot of you in the private sector are going to be in that new governor's ear. You're going to be talking to the new chairman. You're going to be talking to staff. And this is an issue that you need to talk to the new governor about to ensure that the state is going to pursue this over the next 4 to 8 years, to develop the science, to develop the legal and policy piece, to ensure that we're setting up this program in a way that is removing carbon out of the atmosphere, that is generating revenue to the coastal program, because 2032, you know what happens. And so this is a huge component of the coastal program's plan on how you're going to generate additional revenue to supplant the revenue that we're going to be losing from BP. And so this is just I couldn't agree with you said more, Bo, is that, this isn't just something we're starting today. This has been taking place for a while, but I think the real meat of the work and actually setting up the framework is really in front of us. Any questions for Bo or Harry on this? We're not taking comments now, but you can, Mr. Lee, I have a public comment for you at the end of the meeting, and you can. We don't take questions from the audience, sir, but you can come to your at the end of the agenda. You can make a public comment on the record. So the board is clear. Thank you, Bo. Thank you, Harry, for being here today. And moving on to agenda item number 10, Louisiana flood ID update. So President Hotard, I'm glad that you are here today, and I'm gonna tell you how this presentation came to be. I believe it was during Hurricane Barry. Hurricane Barry was when we had record water levels on the Mississippi and Atchafalaya rivers. We were, I believe, already opening the Bonnie Carey spillway. There was talk of opening the Morganza spillway. We were getting projections from the National Weather Service that the Mississippi River was going to overflow, overtop its levees. And so it was a stressful time. And so you had parish presidents across South Louisiana, from President Hotard to President, I don't remember who was in Plaquemines Parish at the time of Barry, but anyway, parish presidents were calling us, what do we do? What are your models showing? Help us make a decision on evacuation, on what do our surge forecasts look like, what do flooding impacts look like. And I'll never forget this. We called together all of the parish presidents on a Zoom meeting. We had the CPRA staff, and we put up these hydrographs, these complicated graphs that allow for us to operate flood control structures across South Louisiana with, which is great. It's a great tool to have. We know when we need to operate a floodgate, when we need to open it, when we need to close it, but you can't export that tool to a decision maker like President Hotard and allow for her to make an informed decision in St. John Parish. And furthermore, she can't use that to inform risk of her residents in St. John. And so shortly after Hurricane Barry kind of fizzled out and we didn't have much impacts, I called Hugh and the folks at the Water Institute. And I was like, we have got to have more tools in the toolkit that adequately forecast surge impacts, flooding impacts, riverine flooding impacts, that we can provide to local decision makers to help inform decisions or to help them make informed decisions. But then we ought to be able to have some kind of output or tool that you are putting out in the public so that the public understands the risk that they face. When you put a hydrograph that does this with elevations, I remember Guy McGinnis and Jacqueline Hotard and some of the parish presidents going, what am I looking at? Tell me what I need to do. And so this is a result of that conversation. And I think that this is a very impressive presentation that he's going to go. He had the opportunity to brief the governor on it. And again, another agenda item that I think needs to be a priority for the next administration. Sorry if I stole too much of your thunder there, Hugh, but I wanted to tee it up. And I was glad that Casey Tingle was nodding his head. Yes, that is that did happen. So anyway, Hugh, thanks for being here, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chairman Klein. Thank you, members of the board. And before I dive in, actually, thank you for also giving that background, because some of the background preceded me, right? This conversation I know has been going on for even before Barry, dating back to Laura and other stories I hear from many who have had conversations around this topic. Before I dive in, I did not bring a coin.
What? A coin?
Terrible handwriting. I don't have a video.
I just need your presence here today, Hugh, so thank you.
But I do want to say a few things.
the agenda's blown up, and I'm going to take the opportunity just to say, extend my thank you as well to you and the leadership of CPRA and the governor's office. You made a comment that CPRA is some of the best of government or state government. And in a former life before the Water Institute, I worked for governments across the country, from San Francisco to New York to Miami to Louisiana. The work that's being done here in Louisiana, the work being done by CPRA, and through the leadership of Chairman Klein, many folks I see here in the crowd, and you all, it's amazing to see the work at different levels of government and through the leadership of this group. And for that, apart from on behalf of Team Coastal, on behalf of the Water Institute, thank you for all you do to really help advance this and bring the team together, and by demonstrating it through your leadership.
Thank you.
The flood ID system. So if anyone is aware of some of these conversations from the background, you might have heard it referred to as real-time forecasting, Louisiana flood forecasting system. We recently agreed to call it the flood ID system. Now, the conversations that led to this, again, proceeded back many years through the thought leadership of folks like Chairman Klein, Mr. Haas, and others that really have driven this forward. But the team that has advanced this concept has been widely reaching across state government, also working with our federal partners, had conversations with the Army Corps, the National Weather Service, many locals. There's been folks working in this day in and day out. Mel Gaspard from GOSEP, Casey Tingle has been very active in its advancement. You'll notice the slides are in the Louisiana Watershed Initiative format. This would not have happened without not only Chip's vision and being able to move this and being dogged and making sure it happens. And we're really taking on, we're not at the pinnacle because you're willing to take on these big challenges like carbon, like forecasting, but also find the ways of folks like OCD to come to the table and also help fund this. Sometimes I say this is the best kept secret of the Watershed Initiative, right? A lot of people don't realize that it's been funding this work. There's also been a number of folks at CPRA. Ignacio Rouge early on gave a lot of insight. Day in and day out, Greg Grandy and Harry Vorhoff are supporting this. And of course, the early vision and guidance from Mr. Haas and Chairman Klein. There's a big team working on this. There's a number of folks from the Water Institute. One person in particular, Zach Cobell. He's been the lead developer of all this. He's also been the lead of the storm surge team, developing the 2023 master plan. So the last 2 years of his life has basically been dedicated to storm surge and planning preparedness here in Louisiana. Team at LSU, the Stevens Disaster Management Institute, have been critical in advancing this. There's a group out of North Carolina who's been doing thought leadership in this space for well over a decade. There's some of the early folks leading this space, including funding some of the early work by the CPRA team, the website many of you, I'm sure, are very familiar with. There's been other really important partners, like the PSC at Carnegie Mellon, a team that we've brought to the table not only support this, but the Coastal Master Plan, and a group out of Iowa. Why Iowa, other than the nutrients coming down here? They have a statewide flood forecasting program. And so they've been very insightful in terms of how to bring this together, not only from a technology, but how to work with different stakeholders, including our federal partners. So the goals of the system, the goals that were laid forward by Mr. Haas, by Chairman Klein at the beginning, were really twofold. The two bullets on the left, or the circles on the left. First is advance our understanding of our flood hazard. So how do we better forecast the flooding, both coastal storm surge as well as what we call compound flooding, so rainfall, river flows, coastal effects all at the same time. And the second was decision support dashboards. And the task that was put before us was not just to support decisions made by CPRA, but by state government. And so certainly Casey here and being involved has been really critical, GOSEP and our partners around developing these tools. The third on the right, one of the goals that evolved over the course of this program is also to build an infrastructure that is extensible. So not only for hurricane season, not only at the coast, but year-round and potentially statewide. So everything I'm going to share with you today is built with the mindset of being extended. And that third goal is really developed through the relationship with GOSEP and the longer vision for this program. So where does it stand today? Louisiana Flood ID, the lead agency moving forward, when the current research and development work under the banner of the Watershed Initiative is completed, the lead agency will become GOSEP. And so that agency, working with Casey and his team, will bring this forward. We're in the process of finalizing a plan for beta testing the system that I'll share for this hurricane season. And the idea is to work with different groups within the state or other mechanisms to fund the operations and the ongoing development year over year. So Flood ID, why do we call it Flood ID? So really it's two pieces. We think of it as two big components of this system. There's the flood hazard information system, so how much water, the flood depths, extents, timing. On the right side, there's decision support. So if you have a better understanding of where you might anticipate flooding, what decisions are you making? How are you driving the decisions? How are you bringing those data together with your flood predictions to make informed and timely decisions? So breaking that down a little bit farther, starting from the left, the way the system works is basically it scrapes information from meteorological providers. So we are not providing our own meteorology. We're getting that from partners like NOAA or the Navy or others who create these forecasts. So going up, scraping that in an automated fashion, both for storm surge for tropical storms, so wind and pressure, as well as things like rainfall. We're putting it into models, so the same models that are used for the master plan for storm surge or the Louisiana Watershed Initiative for projecting rainfall or riverine effects. And then pushing all that information once we do the forecast to visualization tools. First is to be able to look at the hazard itself, and on the far right, again, the decision support tools that are layering in different information. And on the bottom, you see the back-end data workflows, and what that is representing is the automation of this system. So it can be, if the storm shifts, we can manually make changes, but the system can also run basically by itself, even during a hurricane event, so it could be fully automated. So the two components, just very, very briefly, for the sake of time, what does the Flood ID system look like? This is what we call the web interface, or the front end. You'll notice that this looks very similar to some of the tools you might be familiar with today, where we're able to look at different information around the actual water elevation predictions, wave level predictions, wind speeds, looking at different properties. You'll notice that this is Hurricane Ian. The reason we're showing it for Hurricane Ian is obviously luckily there was not a storm to forecast last hurricane season here in Louisiana, but the system was set up in such a way we could forecast Ian. So we forecasted Hurricane Ian in partnership with the U.S. Navy. Just an example of what those forecasts look like, looking at in this case storm surge only, but looking at the storm surge projection and time series there on the Florida coast. Now, what really motivated this from a technology standpoint is leveraging sort of the pros and trying to address as many of the cons as we can from the different tools that exist out there. So there's of course federal products. I'm sure you're all very familiar with some of the products that are produced by NOAA. One of the key benefits of the federal product, that the information that NOAA produces, is it's not just running. They're not just running individual storms or the best tracks. They're running dozens and dozens of hypothetical storms, pulling that together to give you an idea of your total risk. They're publishing the 90th percent risk, which means only a 10% chance of being exceeded, but they have the information to give you an idea of what your full risk profile looks like. On the right side, the state has commissioned work and it has leading work here, already been happening for many, many years in the state to get more granularity, a better understanding of what's happening locally. The con is that there are sometimes challenges using that information if it's just a single storm. So you don't want to make certain decisions based on one potential storm track, but be able to also have that local context. So taking that into account, the idea of the Flood ID system is to, again, leverage the pros of those two different concepts, try to address the cons, and really focusing on the meteorology to be able to pull in ensembles like the feds, to pull in individual storms, not only the best track, but the kind of meteorological information you'd see if you look at your iPhone, windy.com, or any other app you might use where NOAA's publishing those kind of data. The system is set up to account for compound flooding, so not only storm surge, but rainfall, stream flows. There's obviously the example that Chip gave with Hurricane Barry, or you can see by the graphic, there was also with the High River concurrent, but there's also storms like Laura and Marco, where there's two concurrent storms occurring in the Gulf, so multiple storms at one time are accounted for. And one of the key things is that there's multiple users already on this system. So the Department of Homeland Security is using this for this upcoming forecasting season for the work that they do. The National Oceanic Partnership Program, led by the Navy, is using this system, and university partners across the country. And why that is so important is that we don't have to learn all the lessons here, and we don't have to bear the burden of the cost here of its ongoing development, but there are a number of users already activated in this open source platform. So the last couple slides, the decision support tools, this is certainly what we're building towards, right? So we want the flood hazard forecast, that information, but really what it's helping with, of course, is making targeted decisions. And so through the early stakeholder engagement, working with our various partners, There's 6 dashboards that we're working to have in beta testing this year. So in the upper left, there's roadway inundation, and I'll show you a video what this looks like. But basically, the intersection of our flood forecast with the roadway network. So DOTD has provided roadway elevations that we're using in this. Response infrastructure, so working with GOSEP to identify different infrastructure locations where we want to have a better idea of exposure of flooding to those locations or potential egress challenges in those locations. Direct damages, so one thing that folks might not be aware of, it's a tremendous asset in my mind for many applications, is CPRA has put a state or a coast-wide structure inventory together. Every residential, commercial, industrial structure in the state that was put together as part of the master plan. We've been able to leverage that to estimate direct damages to buildings and contents. This is, of course, important after a storm as we think about mitigation grants. But that same structure inventory is used in the lower left in search and rescue, so we can get an idea of the number of homes potentially flooded and what level of damage to use to help prioritize search and rescue. And then the H-hour and R-hour, these are 2 different dashboards to help inform when operations should shut down. So the gale force winds at a statewide level, there's certain information that's used now with H-hour to shut down based on those gale force winds occurring anywhere in the state. This app or this dashboard breaks that down to a parish by parish level, so you have a better idea of you may have another 15, 20 hours in Cameron Parish than you have in Plaquemines Parish to prepare for a storm. The R-hour is the same concept, but in this case, commencing operations and returning. And I should say that I mentioned earlier our partners. This is where the LSU team from SDMI has been so critical, is working in these dashboards, particularly the search and rescue, H-hour and R-hour. So the last 2 slides are here, just very, very brief videos of what some of these initial concepts look like. This is an example of an intersection for Hurricane Ida on the roadway network here on Highway 1. This, of course, has the hydrograph, but this is given in the context of where you are in space. Given an idea in the bottom, you can see that there's the different demarcations, the different color coding, and that helps inform what kind of emergency vehicles would be needed. Is it a boat? Is it a certain emergency vehicle type to have access to that area? The dashboard's also set up to give an idea of what the forecast is just moving forward versus the entire storm event, sort of the most severe flooding during it. And this is an example of, rather than a very severe event like Ida or significant flooding, what this looked like, what would have looked like in Hurricane Barry. So the last video, and this is the search and rescue dashboard, again, built, this one specifically completed or developed by our partners at LSU, developing an app or a dashboard to be able to look at the information in terms of number of homes that are flooded, broken down by different search grids used by different emergency support groups, and have the ability to open up and look at information like the structure inventory. You can see these dots on the screen. These are individual homes, and so the clustering of those is what's leading to the color coding. So the more flooding is leading to the different the red boxes, which are higher priority in terms of search and rescue. And you can see by drilling in, get the details at a parish level or at a home level, what we anticipate the level of flooding to be. So these are the kind of tools that are being developed as part of the flood ID system, again, to help move the state forward, not only CPRA and their partners, but GOSEP and the many partners that have been involved. So with that, Chairman Klein, that is the last slide.
Very impressive. Truly. Appreciate the great work on the continued updates that you and the team at the Water Institute provide us, and glad to see your light on, Mr. Tingle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for your leadership and the team at CPRA for helping us get this ball rolling. I'm happy that we have had an opportunity to transition some of the work and for GOSEP to take some leadership on this, particularly as we get to the decision support conversation, as we try to inform at the state level and our local partners with information that is helpful to them to make some of the hard decisions that have to be made in very stressful times. And so I want to thank the Water Institute and the whole team for the work that's gone into this. From a surge perspective, we've been, on the cutting edge of a lot of these things over time. And from a rainfall perspective, not just Louisiana, but nationally, there's just not been a lot of creativity around what do we do for flooding that's not caused by surge. And then in Louisiana, we don't always have the opportunity to choose which type of flood are we responding to. Most of the time, they're overlapping each other, and what was surge one day is a river stream that's backed up another day, and from the public's perspective or from our first responder community's perspective, regardless of where the water came from, it's there, and you have to deal with it, and it's interrupting operations, it's interrupting life, and potentially damaging property. And so I'm happy that in addition to all of the great response capabilities that we've built in our state and the ability to do that hard work, moving forward and giving them tools that allow them to better pre-position. And that's a lot of what these decision support tools are about. Where do we need to be focused on, but where do we need to be located pre-event so that the resources themselves are close enough to be helpful, but not so close that they're in danger of being impacted or something like that. And then really moving forward, helping our local partners with what kinds of areas do they need to be focused on and getting their feedback. And so look forward to how this moves forward. Happy that this was on the agenda to be able to brief, and Chip, certainly echo your remarks in terms of the path forward here. We're just scratching the surface, to be clear, on where we are today. There's a lot of work that has to happen moving forward, and continued progress along these lines, because one of the things that we're trying to really bring to the table is the ability to do this statewide, and expand some of the capabilities that have, and the thinking behind some of those capabilities that have helped us at a coastal level, and to be able to take those to Northwest Louisiana, Northeast Louisiana, and address some of those issues too. So Hugh and the team, thank you all for your continued work on this, and Mr. Chairman, thank you for your leadership as well.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Tingle. Mr. Bourgeois.
Yeah, this is awesome, and it's something we've been needing a very, very long time. I remember for Hurricane Isaac, as it was coming across, we had some Corps personnel looking for something to do. They were embedded with our local EOC, and what I was trying to get something in real time was just difficult. So I just asked them, give me just the height of the gauges every time the gauge reports, and so we could see where things were building. We knew our biggest threat was going to be way up in the basin, and we were able to pre-position a few resources as it came in. You don't get that opportunity every time, but the slosh models and the things like that go into this, they miss a lot of the local levees. And Ignacio, well, he was in the back of the room. Every year he's trying to make sure that all that information is forward, but that makes the slosh model a very bad public-facing model to show, because they see, well, it says you're going to have 10 feet of water right here, and you didn't have any, and that's because you had levees in there that intercepted that water. So I want to work with you guys. This is exactly something that Casey and I talked about when I had a few things to get off my chest after Ida. This ability to help with things in real time is there. So I want to offer my assistance to anything we can do on that, and Association of Levee Boards, because I think there's a lot we can bring to the table working with CPRA and getting this done. So thanks for this, and it is something, as Chip said, we need to stay on this no matter who becomes governor. This is important.
Yep, thank you.
I would welcome that conversation as well. As Casey noted, we're in the early days still. I mean, we wanted to get to a place where the concept, we're very confident and comfortable with where it's moving, but these conversations and really understanding the need, that those are the next steps. And so I would certainly welcome those conversations and look forward to it.
One of the things that I've been most pleased with, Hugh, is your willingness to engage entities across state government that some may feel as if they don't have a particular role in responding to a storm. And so the example that I love to use is the Department of Children and Family Services, right? So they're responsible for foster children across the state. And so for you to be able to go to that department and say, what do you want to see from a statewide perspective? What do you want us to be able to show on your facilities, your infrastructure? Go to the National Guard. Casey talked about pre-positioning assets or wildlife and fisheries and DOTD, and I just think this is going to be something that really serves the state well and allows for decision makers to make informed decisions. I would encourage you, I know you've briefed the governor on this, I don't know if you've had the opportunity to meet with local parish presidents on this, but I think that that's something that I know the parish presidents would welcome. So I know Meg Bankston has the Association of Parish Presidents, and she can corral all of those members just to get their input, their feedback on some of the things that you're working on and some of the things that they'd like to see incorporated into some of these outputs. And the same would apply. I would take Dwayne up on his offer for ALBL as well. So, all right, board is clear. Hugh, thank you for being here. Awesome work. And thanks to all the men and women of the Water Institute. Let's see, Olivia, who's doing the legislative update? Charles is. Okay, Olivia is not here today. So Charles is going to go, followed by Neil. And then we're going to have a brief update from Harry and David. What I may do, Harry and David, if we could just keep that last, I know that we've got several slides, but it may be, let's just keep that brief, and then we can email the presentation out to board members, because I know that that's something they're going to want kind of our thoughts on the impact. But go ahead, Charles.
Okay.
Sutcliffe.
Thank you, board members and Chairman Klein. Yeah, it's a shame Olivia couldn't be here today. She did an amazing job this session, stepping up when staff changes happened, and so I just think she should be here to kind of talk about this and take the credit that she deserves. So anyway, I just want to just thank her for all the things she did for us. So I'm just going to move pretty quickly through some of our priority bills, some of the budget bills that affected us, and leave it at that and see what you guys want to ask. Brent already mentioned it. We've already talked about it a lot, but the master plan and the annual plans passage were really the headlines for us from this year. And again, I think Monica said it better than anybody, just the way that this agency is able to kind of talk about its work and show its work and be supported by such a wide, diverse group of stakeholders is kind of what made that possible. Also should thank Representative Zarang and Senator Henskins who moved the instruments that were necessary through the process, and then everybody that came to testify and support that. So it was SCR 17 that was the master plan vehicle, and SCR 6 was the annual plan. Those both were unanimously approved. A third priority bill that was successful this year that was very exciting, is also authored by Representative Zarang, establishes the Chief Resilience Officer in statute. And so that legislation builds off of the work that we started here at CPRA, and that Governor Edwards kind of kicked off using an executive order, but now it's in statute and really makes it a priority for the state in every administration going forward. And it really is kind of modeled off of the successes that we've had with the executive assistant for coastal activities position. So this is now a statewide position that every governor will kind of fill, and to kind of to identify and implement kind of resilience priorities that affect everybody across the state. So we expect that bill to be signed this week, and that's very exciting.
Well, you made that happen, Charles. I know you're not going to toot your own horn at the mic, but so the governor named Charles as the Chief Resilience Officer of the coast when he was reelected, and ever since then, Charles has been working across state government, every single state agency and state government, on what does it mean to be resilient. How are you incorporating all of these master plan, environmental scenarios? How does that overlay with your mission? And one of the things that Charles's vision called for creating a Chief Resilience Officer statewide that has that authority and that power to coordinate the state agencies, similar as the executive assistant for coastal does as it relates to protection and restoration. But we know that being resilient is broader than just being better protected by a levee. Or having restored land. And so I want to commend you, Charles, for your vision and your good work, and you too, Z, for handling yourself well at the mic during the legislative process.
Well, he did.
Yes, Z. Yes, thank you, Z.
Thank you, Z.
Yep.
Thanks, Chip. Thanks, Z. So just moving on to the next one, for the second year in a row, offshore wind revenue bills authored by Representative Orgeron did pass the House, but they failed to make it through the Senate. And so they were kind of stalled out during some of those larger political budgetary conversations that were happening at the legislature. And then once things started moving again, it didn't have time to get to Senate Finance and kind of do all the things that it needed to do. I think kind of Chairman Klein's been kind of talking a lot about what needs to be on the list for the next administration, and I think this is clearly one of them. I mean, wind revenues are not going to be a silver bullet for replacing all of the BP dollars that are going to go away in 2032, but that is money that we know is coming. A lease sale is coming this summer. We've got to be, it's a concrete measure we can take, and so we've got to kind of make sure that stays a priority in the years going forward. And there will be obviously a lot of other measures that will be happening in the near future to kind of explore funding opportunities. As far as budget bills, real quick, the governor did recommend $157 million from surplus go to CPRA for one-time project expenditures. We created a project list that maximized our ability to help protect communities that were impacted by the major hurricanes the last couple of years, and that could leverage federal dollars. And so we thought that was the right way to go with that. In the end, CPRA got $148 million through two different instruments. So again, Representative Zarang had a bill, HB 550, that kind of transferred general fund dollars in the Treasury to various accounts across state government, and one of those including an additional $40 million to the CPRA Trust Fund. So that was really big. And then HB 2, the capital outlay bill, was the second place where CPRA received $107 million in surplus funding, as well as the appropriation for that $40 million. So those are the two major bills that kind of delivered those dollars, $148 million, but it is $10 million less than we were kind of looking for. So the agency, we're taking another look at the project list, trying to see what adjustments need to be made based on that difference. We're looking at project timelines, we're looking at federal match opportunities, all the different components that go into that to kind of figure out what that $10 million actually means on the ground in terms of projects. Then just a couple other bills that I'll touch on that do, kind of the first ones do affect funding too, from other kind of directions. HB 254, now Act 199 by Representative Polly Thomas, created a constitutional ballot measure to eliminate certain funds. And one of the funds on the kind of list is the Atchafalaya Conservation Fund that is part of the CPRA's Atchafalaya Basin Program. So it would kind of eliminate these funds and take whatever balances are left over and put those into the general fund. This is a ballot measure that will appear in the November 18th election. So coming up this fall. There were, coincidentally, a couple other measures that would have increased money to the Atchafalaya Conservation Fund that didn't make it through, but this ballot measure is going to happen that would eliminate that fund. There's a second one, similarly, HB 47 by Representative Richard Nelson, now Act 107, that creates another ballot measure that would be a constitutional change to increase the percentage of surplus dollars that are directed to the unfunded accrued liability, which is the state employees and teachers' retirement systems. It would take it from 10% up to 25%, which is an indirect effect for the coastal program, because that would kind of indirectly result in fewer available surplus dollars that could be allocated to the coastal program and all the other eligible uses that are kind of on that list. So that measure is going to be on the October 14th ballot coming up this fall as well. A couple other measures that aren't budgetary that are just kind of worth mentioning. Representative Kerner from Lafitte had HCR 72 that urges and requests the Corps to reconsider the mitigation and stewardship plan for Mid-Barataria to include tidal levee protection for Lafitte, Barataria, and Crown Point, and it also requests our congressional delegation to kind of look to secure funding for those projects that CPRA is also kind of working on. There were also a lot of carbon capture bills that drew a lot of attention this year's session. Particularly related to activities proposed in and around Lake Maurepas, which is of interest to this group. Ultimately, the only bill that passed was HB 571 by Speaker Schexnayder. And that bill kind of creates a regulatory framework for CCS that includes notification requirements, environmental analysis, and revenue sharing for parish governments where those projects are cited. So that's the first big step on that issue. That issue is probably going to keep coming up in years to come, I would imagine, as well. And then finally, there was an effort to formally establish the Watershed Management Council and the Watershed Initiative within the governor's office. That was SB 42 by Senator Mills. It did get unanimous support in the Senate, but was not taken up by the House chamber and voted on Those two entities, that entity was created by executive order again by the governor, and there's also governed by an agreement with HUD, but it's not yet established in statute. So nothing changes now, but it doesn't have that kind of statutory protection that they were looking for this session. And we have a lot of people in the room that were a lot closer to a lot of these events than I were, but we can still try to do some questions if you'd like. So,
see here. Well, coming from someone who had a front row seat, Representative Zarang, do you have a question?
Not question. I wanted to commend and kind of appreciate the effort and the fact that the bill was a result of Charles and all the good work that he did, but you kind of stole my thunder. But since you're bailing, I'll let you slide. But
okay.
Apart
Just
from
give me
that,
a coin, would you please?
No.
Some? I mean, what you got?
Cha-ching. Yeah, you're
yeah,
going,
I'm following just like you did. You bailed, right?
Yeah, I think you're bailing for the coin, maybe. That's So,
okay.
Yeah, well, one bit of advice, don't go into politics. I can promise you. The coinage ain't there. Yeah. But that aside, no, I think the bill, we didn't have many major challenges, a few questions, but I think first and foremost, people recognize how important that position would be, but more importantly, the fact that we had such a very competent and experienced person who was at the helm. I would just suggest, I don't know, I hope you do, with the new administration, whoever that would be, would strongly consider, I hope you continue to put your hat in the running if you would be interested in new administration, and please give you full consideration, because I think Charles has the experience and capability to take it even to the next level, because you did as much as you could within CPRA and are limited by the leadership you were under. But that aside, I think in this new position you could take it even further and expand the capability of that position, and I hopefully look forward to working with you and supporting you next session. And we did have some challenges in regard to funding, but I think we were, because of the fact that CPRA does just an outstanding job. Credit to, really, it pains me to say Chip. No, really, it's you're going to be missed. I know I'm going to miss you. I know you're still going to be around, but you have done a great job at the helm and continue to move this agency forward, and it's amazing what you all do. And I still say it at every opportunity, even in the master plan, that there is no other state agency that, considering the magnitude of the projects and funding and the limited personnel and the capabilities and what they produce, are probably the most efficient and effective agency we have in Louisiana state government. And I am proud to say that I had a small part in helping you guys continue through the budget and continue the efforts that you had. So the funding for you guys is like everything else, can be somewhat challenging, but I think everybody recognizes how important it is to the state, actually to the nation, but more important to the people and the resources and ecosystem of Louisiana. So again, I want to thank you. You will be missed, Mr. Klein, but I know you'll still be around. Love you, man, and I know you're gonna do well whatever you do and whatever coinage you pursue, and best of luck to you. But again, thank you all, and Charles, you did a great job. Oh, and you mentioned it, but true, Olivia is not here, but again, Olivia did a great job through this session in providing support and information that is critical to us as legislators, and I want to thank her as well.
That's because Russell, like you and me, he bailed too. So. But thank you, Z. I've said it before. Look, we.
Yeah, you can have that one. There you go.
There you go. But I appreciate that, Z. And as I've said it many times before, we certainly stand on your shoulders, because you certainly have a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this overall effort as well. So thank you, and I love you too. All right. Anything else, Charles?
No, thank you. Thanks very much.
All right, let's hear from Mr. McMillan on a federal update. What? 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, Board. Wanted to describe kind of the impact and how this came to be, that NEPA reform, something that hadn't occurred since 1982, and many folks would say you can never change NEPA, happened this past month thanks to a lot of Louisiana input and kind of what that means for coastal, as well as some updates from NOAA and the White House. And first of all, I'll mention that Governor Edwards is also taking a big leadership role in permitting reform writ large. He's the co-chair through the National Governors Association of a permitting reform group with Utah's Spencer Cox. So really, Louisiana is very involved in the bipartisan nature of making projects be delivered faster, but maintaining our safeguards. And this was a great step that didn't even anticipate it happening so soon, but there's more to come as well. So we're going to keep pushing, and coastal is very involved with some other state agencies, of course, in adding to the conversation. But first, what happened that made this happen was called the Fiscal Responsibility Act, and it averted a debt crisis. Congress puts a limit of money we can spend. It was at 31.5 trillion, I believe. And if you reach that amount of spending, you either have to default or dramatically cut spending. And so it's something that Congress does regularly because we continue to spend more than we bring in. And when there's divided government, like Republican-led House and Democrat White House, these become really inside the Beltway big-time clashes. And this one was no exception. There's a lot of posturing, but it came to be with a strong vote. And a lot of the smart money earlier was that we would just listen to Wall Street and raise the debt limit and move on with our days with no real changes. But the House Republicans really wanted to change several things, including permitting. And so they were able to extract some concessions, which is pretty remarkable given that President Biden didn't authorize negotiations until 2 weeks before the debt limit. So this was a high pressure time. And when the negotiations were on with 2 weeks to go before kind of, financial trouble, there's two Louisianans at the table of the big four. From the White House side, Shalonda Young of Clinton, Louisiana, which is quite a small town with lots of superstars produced. Mm-hmm. She runs the White House Office of Management and Budget, and this is a very influential office, kind of hard to access for stakeholders, but really puts all the budget priorities for the whole federal administration. So she and Steve Ricchetti were on one side of the table, and then Speaker McCarthy tapped Congressman Patrick Mahenry and Congressman Garrett Graves. Both had been involved in significant parts of the proposed reforms for a while to kind of help seal the deal and get the message done. And it was funny. It was like the press was asking, like, when y'all were at the White House celebrating Louisiana women's basketball, like, what did you say about work reform? And they're like, we talked about we love LSU. Like we did not do business outside of there, but there was some good camaraderie and just very, very notable, interesting times for the state. And so what they cleared, big picture, on the left column, a lot of this is kind of beyond coastal, but I'll summarize the left column, which is that discretionary spending, which is what funds NOAA, the Army Corps, FEMA, that type of work primarily. It's at historically high times, but it's going to stop growing as rapidly. So since the baseline's pretty high, I think you're not going to see dramatic cuts. But I guess it was inevitable that with the COVID spending, folks are going to want to stop shrinking the pot. And so I think that underscores why the Inflation Reduction Act and the IIJA bill were very unique, and why we need to take full opportunity, because those type of $500 million or $500 billion or 1.2 trillion bills aren't coming anytime soon, from what we can tell. And then on the policy changes side, I've tried to highlight a few that are notable. One is that some of the very expensive rulemaking, you can think of like the Clean Power Plan, where agencies like EPA comes up with a rule and there's a huge economic consequence. That's going to be put on a pause for the next 2 years until the end of this administration, through what's called administrative pay-go. So if they have a regulation, they have to they have to reduce their budget to justify something major. And so I think that just means there's going to be less uncertainty. A lot of those problems come from the environmental permitting side. And then I'll also say that Breeze Act, which was on the table to add revenues, was not didn't really rise up to the level of high discussion. It was great that it was on the table, but I guess it wasn't ripe, and they're really looking to reduce costs here. But then permitting reform did happen, and that's going to have some big benefits. And what was really codified was about 80% of Congressman Graves' Builder Act, which was focused on permitting reform for NEPA. It's the National Environmental Policy Act, which is really a process-driven act. And I'll just kind of quickly summarize all these changes that happened. And you'll hear some people say, "Oh, there's no teeth," or you can say NEPA reform, but nothing's going to change. There's depending on what your project is, it could always be better, I'm sure. But I think this is very significant and touches on a lot of the heartburn projects. And but we'll basically, federal government's tasked more clearly to have a unified decision. Lead agencies actually have leadership authority instead of being kind of held hostage by their lagging co-partners. A fixed schedule is something folks are going to be able to rely on as project sponsors. There's time limits that should be meaningful. Shorter documents that can be more readable and accessible to the public, hopefully getting NEPA documents back to a decision support tool versus a litigation risk covering exercise. There's going to be a recourse for delays. You'll be able to if your project's unfairly delayed, you can go to court and see if the court can compel them to act quicker if there's merit there. Something nice for CPRA is sponsor involvement is gets a higher platform. You can be designated as a co-lead as a state agency. So hopefully, our valuable local input can be more properly heard. Federal agencies can share some authorities. So if you have a project that under one agency would go smoother than another one, they can actually share that authority, and you can take the smoother route. Programmatic options to do something over a large region are encouraged and incentivized, and could have more utility. So that'll be something we look towards long term. And then there's some reforms to add transparency and better communication between federal agencies instead of relying on paper. They're going to try to do a study. So there's digital technologies, aka the internet, to provide some transparency for the public and for different federal agencies. And so, we'll see which federal agencies really adopt these well, or which ones are maybe more stuck in their old ways. But there's reports to Congress on how they operate. And so that's kind of program wide. I think that could apply to any project, but there is some more new reforms I think have even more of a coastal flavor. And so I'll highlight a few of those. When NEPA was changed, instead of considering environmental impacts, it's now going to consider environmental effects. And I think that really works well with restoration, which sometimes has an early negative impact, but long-term has a much better broad impact. It kind of gives a little more authority for folks to look at the big picture. The next one that's bracketed, I think, is a real example of Congressman Graves recognizing what coastal needs and really trying to get the federal agencies to consider that there's a huge cost of doing nothing. When the environmental law came into effect in 1969, they were thinking projects that created damage, and how do we minimize that and make sure that's there. They didn't really consider large-scale beneficial projects. And so, for something like mid-Barataria or sediment diversion where, or just anything in our coastal master plan, which I pictured on the bottom, we have bad consequences if we don't take action. That can be an alternative to contrast the value of the project even more explicitly. So I think we'll take full advantage of that coastal Team Coastal will going forward. And then there's a couple other things on making sure your alternatives are useful, making sure that if you've already spent lots of money to gather data, that can be usable instead of requiring new data just for legal coverage. And then there's also this interesting issue related to revenue sharing funds. It's been defined as not a major federal action. So in some ways that's, and this applies directly to GOMESA, in some ways that's preventative. You could imagine a hostile Department of Interior saying we need to do an environmental impact statement before issuing these funds, since they will have environmental impact. So that's heads that off and keeps the smooth flow of funds going, but also reinforces that these are, well, they are federally generated. These really are very much like state revenue funds. So they're in the guidance of GOMESA, it says there's no enforcement authority. Federal agencies aren't responsible for compliance. You know, the recipient is responsible for fulfilling the project, the eligible uses. So this reiterates that, and I think that just continues to make sure that we are able to use our very flexible funds for the right reasons and in a seamless way. So that's a very interesting bit that we'll see if there's even more value to gain from that. And as I said, there will be more permitting reform. The Senate very much wants to tackle some other thornier issues that involve multiple agencies. I just put these 5 bills to show that it's not over. And one thing I'm also encouraged is a lot of this permitting reforms in the committees that are related to the RISE Act, the BREEZE Act. And so anytime there's activity there, you know, could you grow it to include some of our other priorities? That's something we're looking at. Shifting to NOAA, they announced their Inflation Reduction Act plan, and this is one of the main ones that we highlighted that funds adaptation strategies. And so this is how they carve up their $3.3 billion. 3 real key opportunities for us. One is the Climate Resilience Regional Challenge. They're looking for holistic regional projects to do resilience or adaptation. So we really need lots of partners as we try to compete for that. Tribal Priorities does have $20 million within it for technical assistance that our Louisiana tribes possibly could take advantage of. Unfortunately, that most of that number is kind of off the table for Louisiana. And then what was not mentioned, but what you can see is that there's $1.1 billion left over that they may apply to very worthy infrastructure bill applications. So that one's encouraging to us, which means if we've, as a state, have put a lot in, and they're still ranking highly, that more of the top projects will be covered. So hopefully we can see we can capitalize on that. And then the last thing is the White House issued probably the most far-reaching order on environmental justice in April. And that's been key because environmental justice was a key part of the executive orders on the climate crisis, as well as implementing the infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act. And so this really tries to institutionalize a lot of the themes we've been talking about that are important to competing well, both through like the White House, but also with each federal agency. So they're trying to use the rest of this administration and probably in the future to really entrench that and give teeth to that mission, and which is a very worthy mission of inclusion and covering folks and making sure there's a seat at the table. But they also did a definition of environmental justice, which I'll close on this because obviously everybody wants to achieve something laudable like this, but it's been very hard to know that you're on the right track. And so I'll pull out a few words from the definition that I think we can kind of keep in mind as Coastal. Is the just treatment and meaningful involvement of all sorts of folks, but in the decision making. So involvement that's meaningful, not just theoretical, which I think could be the current situation. And then they're looking at 2 factors: 1, protecting from harms, but 2, access to nature. And I really think our coastal program does a good job on that. But obviously, this is a theme that you can always do better and learn from other folks. But it's not not something that's a fad. I think it's very much going to be part of dealing with federal efforts going into the future. And so, fortunately, I think there's a lot we can say on that front. So that concludes my presentation.
All right, thank you, Mr. McMillan. Ms. Goodson for a question.
So Neil, who's actively working on pursuing some of these? I assume these are competitive grants under the IRA. Is it GOCA, CPRA? And the reason why I'm asking is, from our side, we like to know what match requirements may be, involved, so that we can start kind of planning for it. I know Harry always kept us informed on a lot of the projects. I'm just asking about with these, if the climate ready coasts and communities, if somebody can just let us know.
Sure, we'd be glad to communicate with Lakeisha Hart and Jackson Wright, of course. They're going to announce this later this month, so I think it'd be some of the similar ones we have in a pipeline for the IIJA. But what's nice about NOAA is they don't have explicit match requirements. They count it in their scoring, but it's not always required. And so, unlike the Corps that has that hard 65-35, these funds are close on the closer side of free money. I mean, not exactly, but that's probably as far as I can say that at the moment.
Well, the other part of it is lots of times they require project management offices, is what I've been told, working with DNR. And so usually the state we have to be able to plan for it from the standpoint of whether we have to create new office space, new TOs, and try to convince the legislature that we have to have this in order to get the work done. So I'm just asking, I know you talked with Lakeisha and Jackson. I just let us know whatever you find out as these progress.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Malaz.
Hey, Neil. I just wanted to mention something you probably obviously know, but without action on the state side on wind revenues, it increases the pressure for federal legislation, especially with the proposed wind lease sale at the end of the summer. Whatever measure we would need some kind of go back measure or something like that too. So I don't know if you have anything to say to that, but
that's a good point. The RISE Act has a start date of January 1st, 2022 to cover some of the wind leases. The BREEZE Act, which a lot of the Louisiana delegation has been pushing, is upon enactment. So it doesn't look like they will be in time for our first sale, which, could be, obviously those are some of the strongest spots. So that could be a major one. So hopefully it's not a missed opportunity, but it gets harder each month that you're past a wind lease sale. And already some folks are starting to say that the RISE Act start date, starting to 2022 is a long time ago, and so it is a concern.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Malaz. Neil, great update. A lot of moving parts, as always, in D.C., but if you could send, never mind, Dwayne's going to correct me again, that Inger has already emailed the copies of the presentation to board members, but I know that these presentations are very helpful to members of the board, and so thank you for the update. What's that? And they're posted too. Oh, okay, Neil. Just exit it at will. Thank you for being here, Neil. Appreciate the good work. And
I don't need a compliment.
Do you have a question for Neil? No, not for Neil. Okay, you're dismissed, Neil. Thank you.
Is the board cool with that? Okay.
You may ask for a motion in a second. Public comment. All right, Mr. Bourgeois, you got a question, comment?
Well, I was just looking at the next line item, and with all due respect to Harry and Dave's work here, I think you had mentioned we wanted to try to move through it really quick. I think it's a very, very important issue, so I would like to maybe move it to the next meeting, and by that time, I think some of the federal agencies will have developed some guidance, but it's about the waters of the U.S. and the definition. We do have this in our presentation packages everybody got. So I would like to make a motion to table it to the July meeting, where we may even have some additional things that they could add. It's a great presentation, so I do agree to encourage you to look at, but that would be my motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and everybody does have this, right? So we have gotten a lot of questions on what does this mean for the state's coastal program, the ramifications of the decision. So I'm fine with moving it to the next meeting, but I would ask that members just kind of get up to speed, and then we'll come back next month.
Yeah, it's a really big deal for us. I mean, when you're talking a definition of waters of the U.S. But,
yes. So, but David and Harry, thanks for the Cliff Notes
there's like
version of this.
100 questions still to be answered, right? So, we're not.
And David sat here the whole time waiting for the presentation, but that's what he gets for being CPRA Executive Council. He has to be here. So
he's always waiting in the wings.
That's right. That's right. Okay. Well, I'm fine with that. So we got a motion by Mr. Bourgeois. Can I get a second? Second by Mr. Helmers. Is any public comment? Moving this agenda, any objection? Okay, well, this will be covered next month at next month's board meeting. Okay, well, I've got two public comment cards. One is from Mr. Zach Lee, who is asking to speak on mid-Barataria sediment diversion. Mr. Dr. Sir? Yes, sir. I'm calling you up now for your public comment.
Chairman Klein, thank you very much for your service. What I'd like to point out is that the mid-Barataria sediment diversion benefit-cost ratio is unacceptable. In selecting public finance projects, we expect the benefit-cost ratio to be above 1. I believe the ratio is less than 1. The mid-Barataria is expected to cost some $3 billion and create 25 square miles of freshwater marsh over the course of its life, 50 years. Yet we understand the state is losing 25 square miles of coastal land each year. But by the time the project creates 25 square miles, the state is projected to have lost 50 times that much. A horseback estimate of the physical benefit cost ratio would be 1/50 or 0.02, much less than 1. Marsh, as you know, is a poor storm surge dampener compared to a levee. Marsh dampens storm surge 1 foot in height for every 2.7 miles of marsh. For example, Britton Sound is about 20 miles wide by 50 miles long. And to dampen a 12-foot storm surge coming directly along the axis of the sound would require 32 miles of marsh. According to CPRA, the sound is 1,057 square miles with 288 square miles of marsh. So we would have to create 770 miles of marsh in order to dampen that 12-foot surge. At the cost, the mid-Barataria sediment diversion cost per square miles of marsh creation, that's going to build 25 square miles. How much does that cost? $3 billion. If we did that to dampen the storm surge coming up the Bretton Sound, our cost would be 20.8 times the cost of the mid-Barataria sediment diversion. Instead of marshes, let's do what Louisianians would do: build levees. The citizens built Morganza to the Gulf levee system and cost about 3 $30 million a mile. We could build 2 storm surge protection levees across the 20 miles of Breton Sound for about $1.2 billion. That's about 40% of the cost to build the mid-Barry Tire sediment diversion 25 square miles. Benefit cost ratio of 2 levees is much better than the marsh building option. We could build similar levees to protect Jean Lafitte. Finally, I would like to ask you, would you consider applying simple benefit cost ratio analysis to your decision to continuing to support the mid-Barry Tire sediment diversion? Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here, sir, and for your comments. Our last public comment today, members, is from St. John Parish President, Ms. Jacqueline Hotard.
These chairs are heavy. Good afternoon, everyone. I am speaking on the farewell remarks, really, for you, Board Chairman Klein, and I just wanted to really come and formally recognize you, your leadership, your friendship. It's meant so much to me over my, feels like 50 years, but 3.5 years as parish president. Through, just 7 name storms in 2020 that we weren't impacted by, 2 pandemics, COVID, 2 different surges, and then, of course, Ida that we're still recovering from. And I, went into our promotional items closet, and I said, let me think of some things that I can bring to you that would be meaningful, because I believe in those things, and I do have a handwritten note in there. It's not as beautiful as Colonel Jones. I have seen one of those letters, and it's not a coin. And the first item that I brought was a pair of scissors to cut the ribbon on your future endeavors, but it was confiscated by the security in the front. And it was so funny because they kind of argued back and forth, and they said, when did we start confiscating scissors? And I mean, it was a big argument, and then they tore my bag. And I said, look, can you just give me some tape to tape the bag back? And they threw the scissors away, but we were going to cut the ribbon on that, and so I'll just mail you some scissors. I swear. And so I brought a koozie because hopefully you will have whatever beverage it is that you're having. You will enjoy that. And then another cup with a lid on it. It's funny you said you spilled your coffee, so this you will not, is spill proof. And then just a nice pad so you can keep track of all of the coins that hopefully you're going to chase. And then, I brought one of our umbrellas, and I said it's fitting because your life's, or majority of, a good bit of your life's work has been protecting us from flood waters and so many things. And so an umbrella to protect you from some rainwater was fitting. And then last but not least, this is, it's a small thing. And it's a bookmark that I had made when I became parish president. I bring it to, when I speak with kids. I've just always been inspired by the little story of the bee that isn't supposed to be able to fly, and it just flaps its wings anyway. And it flies. But the bookmark says, always be you. And so I thought that was very fitting for you, because I've just never met someone, like you said, you can go hot to cold very quickly. But beneath it all, you are, I learned a lot on our Shores visit. So many just laughs, the fire in the ass. It was a moment. And those little things at Dunkin' Donuts, I had never eaten one of those things. And you ate so many snacks. And a true story is, when we walked into, I think it was Congressman Graves' office. Yep. And they had a jar of jelly beans, and Stuart and I are looking at the jelly beans, and was it jelly beans?
It was jelly beans, yeah.
And Chip just opens it and sticks his hand in it, and I'm looking at Stuart, and I said, I think that jar's a test to see how trifling somebody could be. to just stick their hand in it. And then there was a scoop. But I said you didn't know there was a scoop until you decided that you were going to stick your hand and eat them anyway. And it was just so funny. You said you were a growing boy. Anyway, so always be you, because you are just so committed to the state. You're committed to faith and family, which is even more so impressive. You're just an all-around great person, and I just want you to remember to always be that person that you are. It's why so many of us are going to miss you and miss your leadership. I'll miss being able to just call you in a storm and say, Chip, what do I do? You know, I'm concerned. I'm scared for my residents. I flooded in Isaac. I'm unsure what to do. And, you know, you would always say it's better to be over-prepared for the storm that doesn't come instead of under-prepared for the one that does. And, I mean, that is just what I lead my staff with. So I'll leave you all this. I'll mail you those scissors, and we'll cut the ribbon on your future endeavors. And I just want to say thank you on behalf of my office and all of the citizens of St. John for all that you've done for us.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
And I'll just leave this here.
Yes. Well, thank you, my friend. You know, some people just have a way of personalizing the issue, the effort, and the mission. And I think you're a great example of that, Jacqueline. Is that you are a sitting parish president, but you just also bring a personal aspect of this that is just really refreshing. And I want to thank you for your good work and the leadership. And yes, our good times in Washington, D.C., from jelly beans to fire in the ass and anything, and trifling, I guess I am. But thank you. That means a lot coming from you. All right, my friends, let's see. We have Mr. Lane, you're blinking.
Well, Chip, I wanted to thank you for everything you do for Louisiana, and especially in St. Bernard Parish. President McGinnis could not be here today. He apologized. He's actually plover hunting in Guatemala. And
not Wilson. You
Well,
gotta leave Wilson alone.
Well, I'll tell you, Chip, had I known the story about Wilson, we'd be having a different presentation here today. But he asked me to give this to you, and I'll read it real quick. St. Bernard Parish Government, we, the President, Governing Authority, and St. Bernard Parish do hereby recognize Kyle R. Chip Klein, Jr., who proudly served Louisiana as the Director of CPRA from 2018 to 2023 as an honorary citizen of St. Bernard Parish, given on this 14th day of June 2023. Signed by President McGinnis and the rest of the council. And on the back, we've got a little pin, a lapel pin, which has the keys to St. Bernard Parish.
Yes, indeed.
Which a couple people told me to change the locks on the 3rd, but if you're going to be an honorary citizenship, this is a prerequisite.
Oh, yes, indeed.
It is not scissors, and I had no problem getting it through.
Jacqueline, could you go get my scissors, please? So I can...
But Chip, thank you, and congratulations on you.
I knew it. I think it was going to be a pair of these, or it was going to be rocks. But
the rocks are being FedEx to you.
Yes, indeed. So got a pair of my wife. Oh. Well, thank you, John. Tough conversations in St. Bernard Parish, but we've always worked through it.
Absolutely.
Every time.
Yep.
And so thank you. And please express my appreciation to the council and to President McGinnis.
Certainly.
All right, my friends. Well, I've said all I needed to say, all I wanted to say, and just thank you. Thank you very much. And for one final time, do I have a motion to adjourn? Let's just have a unanimous motion and a second, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.